Hello and welcome to Fantasy Life Show Week 8 Recap Edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It's a great day to be great. It's a great day to break down all of the happenings from, I know I always say it was a wild day of NFL football, Dwain, but really that one was tough to match. National Tight End Day, just one touchdown after another. We had a record 15 before we even got to halftime of the late afternoon slate. All but one of the early afternoon games hit the over, and then just when he thought things were finally chilling out, Jaden Daniels hits the Hail Mary to send, at least the Commanders and fantasy football fans home with a smile on their face. So what a day, Mr. McFarland.
Yeah, what a day. You might want to cover tight ends on National Tight End Day. I'm just saying, but it was nonstop. I mean, everybody. It wasn't just the starting tight ends. The back end tight ends were also getting up. Were also getting in on it. I think they had 15 touchdowns a day to tight ends out of the 71 total scored. There were 72 at the end once we had Noah Brown. 72 touchdowns a day, and the tight ends had 15, I think.
Points. Gotta love it. So as always, guys, going through each and every game, breaking down the utilization, some sheeshes, and just all the most important stuff that we think will get you guys ready for week 9 and beyond in fantasy football land. So Dwain, let's kick things off with, normally it would be the best game of the day. I don't know where it ranked in this one, but the Browns took down the Ravens 29-24. Cleveland closed as a 7.5-point dog. The over did cash here at 44.5. So famous Jameis back in our lives. And oh my God, Dwain, it's great to have him.
Yeah, man. Jameis being back literally gave every player an upgrade in this offense. So he had 228 passing yards, I think, before the third quarter was even over. We haven't had one game all season where we even got to at least 200 yards from Deshaun Watson. So this is just massive for fantasy football. He literally put all of these pass catchers back on the map today. So with Jameis, we've got Elijah Moore today coming out here with a 29% target share. Who was thinking Elijah Moore would be one of the guys that we might have to be talking about in fantasy, but it is the case with Jameis back. So 16.5 fantasy points on a 29% target share. Cedric Wilson, man, 22% target share, obviously came through with 28.9 fantasy points, 99 yards. He had 2 touchdowns, including the game clincher at the end that sent all of my over tickets. And Mr. Elliott Chris had a really nice win today. I was like, hey, let's tease it up, Elliott. Let's tease it up on Cedric Tillman. So I was glad that came through, and he put it with Jameis and an anytime touchdown.
What a birthday. What a birthday for our fearless leader.
I think Elliott won $10 million or something like that today. So it was a really good day. Jerry Jeudy, 20% target share. Ian, he had 12.9 fantasy points. And then David Njoku, 17.1 fantasy points, even though he finished behind those other guys in targets. So yeah, look, all of these guys are viable. Is Jameis going to come out here and throw for 700 yards every single game? No, but this is what we talked about. The ceiling is always there for a 300-yard passing game when you have Jameis under center. That just simply wasn't in the range of outcomes whenever you had Deshaun Watson. So just a much more functional offense. We also had the play calling handed over from Kevin Stefanski to Ken Dorsey. Looked like they were plenty happy and dropping back and passing the ball. So this is massive for fantasy football. Upgrades across the board. How high would you be ranking some of these guys moving forward? For me, like Cedric Tillman, if we know Jameis is the starter the rest of the way, he's a high-end wide receiver 3, already.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Look, every matchup isn't going to be against a Ravens secondary that was already bad and then was also missing multiple starters today. As cool as that Tillman walk-off touchdown was, if Kyle Hamilton doesn't drop what would have been one of the easiest touchdowns of his life, a player or two before would be singing a slightly different tune out there. But hey, man, it's not like Tillman has come out of absolutely nowhere. Day 2 pick for a reason last year and getting his opportunities, certainly making the most of them. So on a week where, again, we have no teams on bye, maybe a little bit tougher to get him around that wide receiver 24 mark, but at a minimum, Dwain, boom or bust, wide receiver 3, at worst. And hey, with Jameis, certainly do have a case to boom plenty. So you pretty much hit on all the pass catchers doing their things. Was another quiet performance though from Nick Chubb, just 52 yards on his 16 carries. That said, Dwain, just the fact he's handling this workload, pretty good sign for better days to come against defenses that aren't quite as stout against the run as the Baltimore Ravens.
For sure. when we look at Nick Chubb, if you were telling me that by the time he was 2 games in, he would already be getting 70% of the rushing attempts. He had 16 carries today. That's about as much as you could hope for. Obviously Nick Chubb's not back to being Nick Chubb yet, 5.2 fantasy points. But while Jameis is a huge boost for this passing game, just the upside of the offense is now back, Ian. So, if Jameis can manage to get into some of these shootouts or keep the team hanging around, that's going to keep Nick Chubb in some of these games. It's going to give him a chance to turn some of these carries into touchdowns as the season goes on. But we know that he's not going to be working on passing down. So, really, Nick Chubb right now is already back in the role that we saw him in at, last year before the injury, which is getting most of the early down work, but not playing on passing downs. I will note Jerome Ford hasn't played in either of these last 2 games. Jerome Ford looking pretty good this year. So there's a slight chance there's a little bit that goes away from Nick Chubb over to Jerome Ford whenever he's playing. But yeah, I think if you're looking at Chubb, looking at the direction that the Browns offense is potentially headed, I think you have to feel pretty decent about it.
I'm sure we'll see some floor games from the wide receivers. We got the Chargers, Saints, Steelers, Broncos, Steelers, and Chiefs coming up. Not quite the easiest schedule stretch in the world, but at a minimum, Dwain, you got to be feeling really great if you are a Dave Njoku fantasy manager. Another big game after, again, last week's, I believe, overall tight end 1 performance. And just on that touchdown, man, like that is the epitome of what we're looking for here. Tight coverage, but guess who doesn't care if there's a small window to throw to? Jameis freaking Winston fit it in there and got his guy the touchdown. So great day to be great Browns fans. Again, a little bit of a letdown, obviously, though, on the other sideline with the Baltimore Ravens. That said, Dwain, still saw plenty of examples of Lamar Jackson and company flexing their muscles and showing what they could do on offense. I mean, right before Jameis went down and had that touchdown drive, I think Lamar, it took him like 6 plays to go 91 yards, ripping off one big play after another. Did seem like, again, pretty much business as usual in Baltimore, even for Zay Flowers, who I believe still had a full-time role despite playing through that ankle injury.
Yeah, man. Zay was great, especially towards the end of the game. I mean, he came up huge, but I mean, Lamar Jackson, I mean, it's just amazing. Ian, like right now, he's capable of coming out and throwing for 300 yards and rushing for 100. Like that can happen in any game this guy plays in right now. Like the ceiling is just massive right now for Lamar. We're talking over the last 4 games, Ian, 348 passing yards, 323, 281, and 289 today. And he's had 4, 1, 5, and 2 passing touchdowns. So typically a multiple TD passer. And then we tack on the goodness that we already know is there as far as his rushing ability. Man, like by far and away, Lamar Jackson is your QB1 the rest of the way. You asked about Zay Flowers. Yes, he was still out there doing his thing. Was a little bit limited in the route participation today. Actually, no, he wasn't 100%. Like I just refreshed it.
Hey,
like, so the data, when I first go through these, it's like right after the game stops. So some of the notes I have written down, like they actually change as I refresh them. So yeah, they got the route participation updated. 100% route participation today for Zay Flowers, and he led the team with a 34% target share. Mark Andrews, Ian, season high, 78% route participation, 14.6 fantasy points in this one. He had a 16% target share.
Another freaking touchdown for Mark Andrews, too. I think he had like 4 total catches in the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, and now he's got 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games. Just goes to show you how rational and consistent fantasy football can be all the times. Last thing on Zay Flowers, he ran this route, which it was kind of like a broken play thing. I'm not going to blame Denzel Ward for losing track of him. Reminded me of like some of the Senior Bowl madness you see when it's just one-on-one wide receiver cornerbacks. But long story short, did get open for a potential 31-yard touchdown. Lamar did miss that throw. And on the day, man, Zay Flowers, 110 unrealized air yards, Dwain, second highest mark on the week. Honestly, Cedric Tillman also 84 unrealized air yards. Pretty wild that both guys left, some meat on the bone, even though they had otherwise big days. Also had a shishi drop from Rashad Bateman, but I'm not going to be too hard on the guy. As bad as it looked, pretty clear that he just lost it in the sun. But yeah, would have been a lot cooler if he didn't let that 50-yard bomb hit him directly in the face mask and fall incomplete. So got a Derrick Henry touchdown as well. We'll have bigger days from him when Baltimore can play with the lead, as we know. But otherwise, yeah, very, very exciting addition of some AFC North football. Ravens are facing the Broncos next week, so we'll see if that high-flying offense can withstand one of the tougher defenses in the NFL. Eagles took down the Bengals 37-17. Philly was 2.5-point dogs coming into this one. The over did cash at 47.5 here. So really impressive performance by the Eagles, Dwain. I would argue is their most complete offensive performance of the year. Still haven't scored in the first quarter, which is kind of wild that we're sitting here in week 8 and that still is a thing. But Jalen Hurts, I know he's someone I've been, I don't think hating on, just honestly what I've seen. He hasn't looked that dynamic as a runner. Looked like he did have an extra pep in his step out there today. Beautiful 45-yard touchdown, Devonta Smith on the bomb in the back of the end zone. I mean, it just goes to show you, Dwain, that even with the Eagles, again, not exactly firing on all cylinders throughout the first 7 weeks of the year. When they do, man, they can score up there with anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, nothing really to add here on any changes from a utilization standpoint this week, Ian. I mean, you have Eagles on your team. You're pretty much starting them. We'll see if we get Dallas Goedert back next week, but this is pretty condensed right now around A.J. Brown, around what we're getting from Devonta Smith, and obviously Saquon doing Saquon things. We did have a Will Shipley sighting at the end of the game, so that was kind of fun. I think he got his touchdown. Did he get his touchdown taken away?
Taken off.
I think he did. Yeah. I saw the touchdown run, and honestly, like, it was a nice little run. So that got taken away. Last couple of games, we've seen Will Shipley. So just if you're in a super deep, gross league, and you're wondering who might take over the backfield if Barkley were to go down, I think it's probably a split, Ian. But I think there is a good chance that Will Shipley would take on some of those early down carries that Saquon would leave on the field. Knock on wood. We don't want Saquon hurt. Another 108 yards rushing today.
Almost had actually two extra touchdowns, though. Dwain got stopped at the 1 yard line. And what do the Eagles do when that happens? They let Jalen Hurts get his tush pushed into the end zone. So 3 scores on the ground for Hurts. 2 of them were of the tush push variety. This season, I believe Eagles running backs only have 2 carries from the 1 yard line. Otherwise, it has been the Jalen Hurts show. So you mentioned the Shipley 17-yard touchdown run nullified, but otherwise, yeah, pretty great game for the Eagles. They're facing the Jaguars next week. So get your popcorn ready for hopefully more aerial explosions from A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and company. Over with the Bengals, came out there, had a freaking 10-minute drive to start the game. Burrow and Jamar Chase were looking good, but after that, man, really was tough sledding, more drives than not. So not going to overreact to one, bad game of football, particularly with the Eagles. Defensive line, Dwain, I think starting to show out and be that group that we honestly thought they were going to be a little bit earlier in the year when we drafted their DST all over the place. I mean, Jalen Carter, a couple of those snaps he has, man, truly a special talent there on that D line. But I think the biggest question would just be continuing to see this Chase Brown takeover, Dwain, because just from looking at the box score, seems like he is continuing to ascend as the 1A back in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think the only 2 takeaways here, number one, is what you're talking about with the running backs, continues to really lean in the direction of Chase Brown. Now, he hasn't really done a ton with it yet for us, Ian. I mean, he had 63% of the rushing attempts today, but only came up with 11.4 fantasy points. Really in the same role as far as the passing game goes, 40% of the dropbacks, and Zach Moss had 48%. But I do, we've said it multiple weeks in a row, clearly the running back one here. It's still a little bit of a committee, but Chase Brown is the preferred option. Just getting Zach Moss out there a little bit on the passing down. So honestly, Zach Moss, he's just a stash play at this point. I think we've said that before. He can't be near your starting lineup. I mean, he didn't kill you, gave you 7.9 points, not a complete dud, but you really don't want Zach Moss in your lineup, and he can be dropped in smaller leagues. The other takeaway is in the games where we haven't had, T. Higgins, or we've had, Jamar Chase just coming back, from an injury, that sort of thing. Those are the games where Mike Gesicki's been pretty good. So I think that's the one other takeaway we can have here. Still not a guy getting elite playing time, what we would hope to see. Ian, he's not one of these guys gonna be up there with, an 80-90% route participation. But today, I mean, he was at 60% and he was second on the team with a 22% target share behind Jamar Chase, of course, leading with 30% with T. Higgins out. So just remember Mike Gesicki, guys, if you get in a pinch at tight end, and we know we don't have T. Higgins or Jamar Chase, he's been pretty decent in those spots.
Was it just Andre Yoshivas as the full-time wide receiver too, and then a rotation? I did see Jermaine Burton, getting a nice 41-yard catch out there.
Yeah, Jermaine Burton and Trenton Irwin were both out there. Burton was out there a little bit more, 43%. He had an 8% target share, but nothing else to really say here. It was Yoshivas with he had a 95% route participation. Obviously didn't do very much with it.
Gesicki did look good, other than losing that late fumble. Don't think that's exactly going to be
great one-handed snag
by Gesicki
early.
Good stuff there. And for a guy that doesn't even celebrate National Tight End Day, Dwain, he said National Big Slot Day would be something he would get more behind. So Bengals are going to take on the Raiders. And now sitting at 3-5, certainly need to get a big-time winning streak going in a hurry. Next up, guys, the Lions took down the Titans 52-14, covering with ease as 12.5-point favorites. The over cashed at 45.5. I mean, just pretty much business as usual with the Detroit Lions offense, Dwain, putting up all kinds of points. Just not exactly, in the manner maybe we're used to. Just 85 passing yards for Jared Goff. I don't think he had a completion, thrown more than 10 yards downfield. Still found his way to have 3 touchdowns, one each to Sam Laporta, Brock Wright, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Actually, I'm sorry, you got Khalif Raymond. We had a David Montgomery touchdown pass out there to Sam Laporta, I believe, as well. Ben Johnson's trick play bag just never runs empty, man. Got to respect that. But really, man, just a situation where looking at the routes without Jameson Williams, only major utilization takeaway.
Yeah, so Jared on the plays with Jared Goff on the field, because obviously this game was out of hand pretty early. I turned on Red Zone channel and a Lions game broke out today. I mean, they scored so many points. It was like the Lions were up there the whole time. But we did have route participation. We heard we're going to get a heavy workload for Allen Robinson. I think that was Dan Campbell telling us that. No, he was just kidding. 35%. But it was Tim Patrick, 70%. So the guy we would have expected to really take on more of that number 2 role was the guy. It didn't matter today because it didn't really have to matter. But he split a little bit more of that with who was the other guy that was in here the most? Well, I guess it was Allen Robinson, but yeah. So, Khalif Raymond was the other one at 45%. So, but it was mostly to Tim Patrick. So the main point being Jameson Williams, he left like 95% route participation on the table. No one person fully took that over, but it was Tim Patrick in the lead at 70%. So maybe in the future weeks, if it's something where you think it's going to be a more competitive game, you're in a really gross league, maybe you dial up Tim Patrick, but really no other takeaways on the Lions. It was really their offense as usual. Laporta led the team with a 40% target share with Jared Goff on the field, but that was 6 targets. Of course, you talked about the touchdown. He had 1 touchdown called back that he actually caught, and then another one go to Brock Wright, and then he did catch the one from David Montgomery. So it was nice to at least see Sam Laporta get the receiving touchdown.
Tackle out the 1-yard line. Again, could have been a huge game for Laporta, but I'm sure his fantasy managers will at least take, what would have been 16.8 PPR points.
16.8.
That's a blow up game for Sam Laporta this season. Shout out to the Detroit Lions special teams. Again, really making a case. And honestly, at this point, I'm not sure who you could really disagree with as the most complete football team in the NFL right now. I mean, Khalif Raymond had 190 punt return yards. God bless anyone that had to play him and Scott Fishbowl. And then even something named Khalil Dorsey had a 72-yard kick return. So constant short fields, and accordingly, the Lions were able to, again, make the most out of their ever great field position. Over with the Titans, Dwain, look, another nice game from Tony Pollard, had 23 touches and another matchup without Tajay Spears. No touchdowns, unfortunately, but continuing to prove far from dust with 94 yards on the ground and 23 through the air. We also have Nick Westbrook-Akini, 3-game touchdown streak, has like 5 total catches this season, but enjoying that, storyline we got going on. But otherwise, man, it was just the Calvin Ridley show. 10 catches for 143 yards on 15 targets. My man's had 6 for 118 after 15 minutes of action. So no, Dwain, I'm not exactly expecting this Titans offense to be this fancy gold mine for Ridley or anyone else moving forward, but we still know Ridley does a good job of getting open. And if it is going to be Mason Rudolph ahead of Will Levis for at least a couple more weeks, man, we've seen Mason put together, I guess, a more consistent stretch of football than we've ever seen from Levis. Thoughts on Ridley maybe ascending into that upper tier wide receiver 3 territory?
I'm just not sold. Like, I don't trust this offense at all. Like, I don't have any of the same vibes I have with Jameis Winston. And I think a lot of it's because we've just seen Winston play this way for so long. Like, we've got such a career track record. Whereas Mason Rudolph, it's been a lot more rocky. It's been a lot more up and down. We'll occasionally get a game like this, but then we get a lot of duds in between. So I'm thinking Calvin Ridley's still more of a wide receiver 4. He's definitely boom bust. At least we saw the boom. Mostly all we've seen is bust, but at least you did get to see the boom today, Ian. He came through with 22.6 fantasy points, probably on most benches. How many lineups do you think Calvin Ridley was even in today?
Dude,
probably, I bet
Dwain,
none.
His other big game was against the Jets when he had 2 touchdowns, and no one was starting him in that one either.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, hat tip to Ridley. He went out and did his thing. There's been kind of a lot of noise around the situation the last couple of weeks. Almost seemed like the coaches were a little frustrated, saying, we're not going to force it anymore to Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley just came out. He balled out. He was getting open, doing his part. I just worry about the quarterback. So I would still say boom bust wide receiver 4. If by some chance someone in your league really needs a wide receiver, which is a good by chance kind of thing because there's so many wide receivers hurt, I would be trying to sell Calvin Ridley this week, even potentially in like a 2-for-1 type of deal. Make him the throw in kind of piece where they're like, oh man, I need a receiver and I'm getting this other thing. You're giving me Calvin Ridley. They kind of feel good about it. I would be trying to move Calvin Ridley, not guaranteeing you're going to get anything. You're going to have to do it before the projections come up. I know on most of these sites now, the projections come up so early. Back in the day, and you can make these kind of trades, but now people are like, oh, that dude's projected for 7 points. Like, they already know, like, the last week was probably a fluke. So you're going to have to try to get it done pretty quickly, in my opinion.
I would say, man, worst case, you send out a trade offer, you get roasted by the boys in the group chat. All right. There's worse things that can happen out there.
Exactly.
And
just give it a shot.
Yeah, best case, maybe you get to sell high-ish on Calvin Ridley. So there were some sheeches here on the Titans side of the ball. Something named Jaquan Jackson. Dwain had a 19-yard touchdown nullified, and then actually got loose deep later, but Mason Rudolph did not have one of his better throws on that one. Also had Tyler Boyd drop what had the potential to be a short goal line touchdown. So really was a more entertaining game from Mason Rudolph than I can really ever remember, just with him being willing to throw downfield. Also ran for a touchdown, juked out a Lions linebacker, man. Like, you get juked out by Mason Rudolph in the open field, you got to do some soul searching after that. So really, not ideal on that front. But yeah, man, otherwise going to be Titans versus the Patriots next week. Christian Gonzalez shadow day for Calvin Ridley, man. That is not going to be pretty there. Probably does warrant a legit downgrade. So Lions at the Packers. Hopefully we have a fully healthy Packers offense to challenge the, again, kings of the NFC North right now. More on that in just a little bit. The Cardinals took down the Dolphins 28-27. Arizona closed as 4-point dogs. The over cashed at 46.5. Kyler Murray joined. Still possible for him to throw for over 300 yards. And accordingly, when that happens, lo and behold, his top pass catchers all of a sudden start booming in the box score.
So I think we're going to have a new bit on the show. Basically, what quarterback do we need to step up their play? And then I'm just going to talk bad about them. It works for Trevor Lawrence. And I mean, we finally had it with Kyler Murray, and we kind of went off on him. I say more me than you, but I think you saw the supporting points for it, Ian, and you kind of felt some of the same things. So, we just try to motivate these guys. We're just trying to get them back into our good graces so that we can start guys like Marvin freaking Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, and get those fantasy points from them. But yeah, you talked about it. 307 passing yards on this game. His other high for the season was 266. Other than that, Ian, it has been really terrible. I mean, we're talking 162, 207, 142, 195, 214, 145. So this was a much needed outing from Kyler Murray. I didn't get a chance. I only got to see what was on Red Zone, and a lot of what I saw on there was Kyler doing the out of structure stuff, which was him scrambling out of play. And that's great. That's always been a great part of his game. You let him get outside the pocket. You let things just become more reactionary for him. He's making the big plays. What I will be interested to see is when we go back and watch it, did he do more of the things that you just need to be doing, inside the structure of the play? One of those passes to Marvin Harrison Jr. was definitely within structure, one of the deep passes for a touchdown. So I thought that looked good, but we'll go back and take a look at it. But yeah, this is really encouraging for Kyler. And guys, look, we know this. If he comes out and he has these passing games, we know what he can do, on the ground. If he can get this going, he's back into our mid-range QB1 conversation the rest of the way, but it's just one data point right now.
Marv did beat none other than Jalen Ramsey on that aforementioned touchdown, 111 yards, and caught 6 of 7 targets on the day. So I will say, Dwayne, none of it still felt especially easy, which would be nice. But, you do look at the next-gen stats like route tree, and you do see a few more deeper crossers and not just one constant back shoulder slot fade after another. So I do think you're going to find a lot more out-of-structure performances from Kyler than you prefer. But honestly, just kind of what he does. And, at least there are examples of days like today when it's able to work out. So not the stiffest, defensive test in the world. I get it. Jalen Ramsey, honestly, been a little bit of a show of his former self, I think you could say, over the last season or two. But hey, at least for one day, Marvin Harrison Jr. showing that maybe he wasn't the worst, first round fantasy draft pick in the history of the world. Also, another great game from Trey McBride. Still hasn't scored a freaking touchdown this year, Dwayne. I think it's now at 58 targets. He certainly surpassed Brandon Ayuk at this point for the most in the league without a touchdown, but still caught 9 of 11 for 124 yards. So I'm sure those days will come. Otherwise, got another short touchdown for James Conner, continuing for the 6 straight years, almost in that Tyler Lockett vein of things, to just smash his ADP, regardless of where he's drafted. So good to see there. But otherwise, Arizona Cardinals now 4-4, certainly not making it easy on themselves with some of these late game heroics. But hey, a win is a win is a win. Unfortunately, Dwayne, the greatest show on surf, could not get that W. However, seeing Tua Tagovailoa back under center, healthy, looking good, and accordingly, the rest of the offense started looking quite a bit more like the guys we were drafting happily here a couple short weeks ago.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Tyreek Hill, they didn't smash the way we had hoped in the passing game. I mean, Tyreek Hill came out and scored 13.2 fantasy points, but you'll take it over 2. You'll take that over 2. He had a 90% route participation today, which is that's amazing. We don't normally get that from this offense. We did see it last weekend coming out of the bye. So fingers crossed, man, that we could actually see Tyreek in a full-time role. He's usually around 80%. To 85% route participation in this offense. Jalen Waddle also 85%, 8.5 fantasy points in a PPR. But both of them were the top 2 targets on the team. Well, HN, sorry, was the number 2 target on the team. So sorry, Mr. Waddle, but 24% target share for Tyreek Hill. I don't need to belabor any of these points. If you have Dolphins, you get Tua back. You're really excited about it. I think the big takeaway here is what we saw in the backfield, Ian, for the second consecutive game. We have 2 healthy games with Raheem Mostert as well as with Devon Achane. And what we're seeing is about 40% of the rushing attempts going to Achane, but he's getting 65% route participation. Yep. And then we have Mostert coming into the game and getting 40% of the rushing attempts. So they're sharing that workload on the ground, but man, it's not really mattering for Achane because he's so involved in the passing game. He has 18 opportunities in each of the last 2 weeks. Ooh. Opportunity means a rushing attempt plus a target. So 18 opportunities for a guy like Achane, guys. That is plenty. Obviously, he came through in a big way for you today with 26.7 fantasy points. So HN back in that running back 1 conversation with Tua Tagovailoa back under center.
He only has 1 less catch than Tyreek this season, man. He's pacing for 70. Like, that's just been the savior more than anything. And on
looking
top
healthy.
Of that, exactly, man. Because we always do this every year. A guy gets injured and they play through the pain, and we're really attentive to it in the first week or 2. Then we kind of forget about it. But if you've been watching Achane throughout this year, really weren't seeing the same guy that, again, set the freaking NFL record for yards per carry as a rookie, starting to look more and more like himself. I do believe last week was his first time over 5 yards per carry, and today 9.7, including a season-long 47-yard rush where, yeah, once again, looking like one of the fastest players on the field. So loving Achane, loving Tyreek. And with Waddle, again, I'd like to think we get some better days ahead. Tough matchup next week going into Buffalo to take on that Bills secondary that has historically done a good job against this very offense. But hey, Tua under center doing his thing, sliding Dwain. It was great to see that. We got like a huge roar from the crowd after he just picked up that first down and thankfully took care of himself. But
otherwise, I wanted him to slide about 5 yards sooner, but
I know.
I mean, I was okay, man. Don't press it too hard. Go ahead, get down. One other quick thing I would say is Mostert. He scored the 2 touchdowns today. Didn't do a lot otherwise, but again,
you're a sicko start. Congrats.
Yeah, he had 9 rushing attempts. Thank God for the touchdowns because it would not have worked out. Versus 10 for Achane. But again, like if it's going to be close like that, and we shouldn't just assume that Mostert's going to be this, guy getting, this mucking it up as far as yards per carry. Like we've seen him be very explosive as recently as last season. Right. So, I mean, there could be some good news here for Mostert on the way. A running back. I think he's very squarely in the running back 3 with upside conversation now, Ian. And like if the Dolphins offense did get back on a roll, and they're going to need to because they've only won 2 games. They've now lost 6. They got to really get things, rolling. Man, Mostert could still end up being a guy that works his way back into that running back 2 conversation. I mean, how many touchdowns did he score last year? Like
23, I think.
Yeah. So don't write him off, guys. Just Mostert is a guy that's going to end up being usable, especially when we start getting to these heavy bye weeks.
21, excuse me. I got a little excited 21. There, Dwayne, but still quite the amount. Only other question I would have is while he didn't boom in the box score, Jonnu Smith did have 6 targets, caught 4 of them for 20 yards. And I know after the bye, we really saw him for the first time all year have that full-time role with the route rate north of 70%. Did that persist for another game?
Yes, 73% route participation as well today. I still don't know I still don't know what it means, to be honest, because like McDaniel will really just kind of pull the rug out from under you on these tight end things. But hey, it's 2 weeks in a row. So I mean, I think that allows us to move him up a little bit.
And he is one of those rare tight ends that does get plays designed for him with the screens, with the pop passes, things of that nature. Because, yeah, Jonnu with the ball in his hands is an absolute beast. So only injury I would note, Michael Wilson, the Cardinals wide receiver 2, looked like he was a little bit hobbled there at the end. But otherwise, I think these teams made it through scot-free. Always can appreciate that. Let's talk about some more AFC East goodness. The Patriots, yes, the New England Patriots took down the Jets 25-22, adding another chapter to this nightmare of a 2024 season for Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. So Patriots closed as 7-point dogs. The over did cash here at 41. So unfortunately did have Drake May get injured and concussed early. Now, wasn't exactly because his O-line just let 5 pass rushers go through and tee off on him. He was picking up a lot of yards on a scramble. And then as he started to slide, man, just like an unfortunate unfortunate hit. I didn't think it was intentional or anything like that, but Jets defender came from behind and then just actually, hit him in the back of the head with his helmet. So left with the concussion. Accordingly, Jacoby Brissett came in and did enough to get the victory. 2 short goal line touchdowns from Ramondre Stevenson to help save the day. He did look pretty healthy, though. Had a nice, catch actually on the sideline, showing that he is pretty good, 3-down back when leaned on. Kayshon Boutte, 46 yards, and Hunter Henry with 45 yards, tied with the team high 6 targets. So, Dwayne, I think we've kind of seen with this Patriots offense, okay, Stevenson, he has a good game, and we immediately start yelling about selling high. Don't think we're going to be backing off of that one here as well, but man, if we do have to go into Tennessee next week against a secondary that's been pretty good more games than not this season, without Drake May under center, going to be really tough to trust anyone.
Yeah, for sure. And just real quick on, Stevenson, it's just when the game script stays between the lines, Stevenson's going to give you points. It's just you don't know when those are going to come. Like, what games are the Patriots going to get dusted versus what games are the Patriots actually going to keep it close? Like, did we really expect them to be this close with the Jets today? Maybe we should have. But I just really thought that the Jets, defense would just shut this thing down and they would be able to do enough to pull away at the end of the game. And then that would really hurt a guy like Stevenson. But yeah, he scored 23.5 fantasy points a day because he scored the 2 touchdowns and the game script stayed right for Mr. Stevenson. And the passing game, yeah, man, it's going to be super hard to trust anything. So let's just tell people what's going on with the routes, because that's the best we can do. And the only way you guys care about any of this is if you play in a complete skank sicko league. And you guys know if you're in one of those, I'm not going to explain what it is. Just trust me, it's really bad. But Kayshon Boutte, 86% route participation. Okay. He led the team. Kendrick Bourne saw a tick up at 78% this week. And then we saw Hunter Henry doing his normal thing at 78%. And that's pretty much it. That's all we have to talk about here.
Sounds good to me. Well, on the other side of the football, again, you lose to the Patriots. You're not feeling too good about life. However, we did get Breece Hall, 89 total yards. Garrett Wilson had 113 total yards while avoiding that Christian Gonzalez shadow. Devontae Adams, accordingly, did not record a catch directly against Christian Gonzalez. Did catch 4 of his 6 targets, though, for 55 yards otherwise. So, again, not exactly the performance we were hoping for, but I do maintain, Dwayne, as much as I did think the Jets were going to have more success out there today, the schedule is starting to lighten up. And it has been rough. I mean, over these next 6 games, man, Texans, Cardinals, Colts, Seahawks, Dolphins, and Jaguars, I would like to think we're going to start seeing some more fireworks out of this offense. But at least in Breece Hall's case, maybe got to adjust those expectations a little bit, because as much as we would love to see him have that 90% snap, every down workhorse role, which honestly seemed like he had over the last 2 weeks, Jets aren't giving up on Braylon Allen just yet.
Yeah, he did have it. And so, this is the thing when we do this sort of work, we wrote about it in the utilization report last week. We're like, okay, we got 2 data points, both with the new offensive coordinator, Todd Downing, new head coach. And we're going to go with this. We're going to say he's in that CMC role. He's getting all the work. No, just kidding. Just kidding. This week, we're going to actually decide to use Braylon Allen. So I don't know if it's something to do with their opponent or what it might be. Look, Breece Hall's still good, Ian. Like, he's still out there for a 74% snap share, still got 57% of the rushing attempts. He's not getting 75% of the rushing attempts. Still had 55% route participation. That number had been up more in the 65, 70. So he was really in that CMC Kyron Williams kind of tier over the last 2 weeks. And today we saw Braylon Allen come out here and get 43% of the rushing attempts. So things were a lot closer, 16 carries to 12 carries. That's Breece Hall versus Braylon Allen. So slight downgrade here for Hall, but it could easily go back to it just being Hall next week. I look at him as a mid-range running back 1, but we still know he has that ceiling to be a very high-end running back 1 when they decide to give him that really big workload. It's just very hard predicting what coaches are going to do. We do the best that we can with the information that we have, but this is a great example of how just when you think you have something, like really like you've got to read on something, you really don't.
I don't even really have much of a problem with Braylon Allen coming in as more short yardage back. He's been good this year. Same thing with Tyler Algier and Bijan. Like, these are good second running backs. The pass game usage was disappointing. I mean, Breece Hall coming into this one led all running backs in PPR points per game from receiving. Unfortunately, though, just 1 catch for 9 scoreless yards today through the air. So again, most of the targets were going to Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. Another nice game from Garrett, proving that just because Adams is in town, not necessarily going to be a complete takeover from the Raiders and Packers wide receivers. So are you adjusting kind of the rest of the season thoughts between the two, Dwayne? Because I know it's not like we were burying Garrett Wilson down the ranks. I'm sure everyone's still starting him, but man, through 2 weeks, man, looking more like just almost a straight draw atop the kind of pecking order, as opposed to this 1A, 1B situation.
I feel pretty good about like the way we forecasted it. We said this was going to be a very consolidated attack around Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams, and I still had Garrett Wilson slightly ahead because just the younger ascending player, I mean, as a tiebreaker kind of thing.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have surprised me though if it was Devontae Adams leading the way. The thing we have to remember though is this is only the second game for Devontae Adams with Aaron Rodgers.
Mhm.
Now they obviously have past chemistry, but there's still things you got to work out on the timing and everything. I mean, if you could just show up and play, they wouldn't have training camp, right? I mean, it takes time to get these things going. So based on that, man, I actually think it's pretty impressive what Devontae Adams has done. Even though he's got a guy like Garrett Wilson coming out here and getting a 32% target share today, to get 24% for Devontae Adams and only his second game back, I think both of these are going to be fine. To your point, I think it is like, people got to realize how good Garrett Wilson is. I get it. The Jets are a punchline right now, and it's not going well. Losing games they shouldn't be losing. I understand. It's that world where you put a fantasy tweet out there for people to look at, and then the Jets fans get into it, and it's just like, oh my God, Garrett Wilson sucks. We gotta stop using it. I'm just like, man, I'm not even going to respond to all this. But the guy's a really good player, man. He is very, very hard to cover. I mean, Garrett Wilson is just one of the better. He's open all the time.
Yeah.
You guys, just go watch him. He's open all the time. He is very, very difficult to cover.
So twitchy, man.
So twitchy. Yeah. So both guys looking really good the rest of the way. Aaron Rodgers also still looking pretty good the rest of the way. The Jets, I can't tell you, man, what's going to happen with them. It's pretty crazy that they've only got 2 wins, but they're not out of it. Like besides Buffalo, like it's kind of tough right now in that division. I mean, Miami's only got 2 wins, as well. And then you got the Patriots there. So, I mean, there's still a chance. So we'll see what they look like moving forward.
Hey, Jets are tied for second in the AFC East right now, Dwain. They're also tied for last, but, just thought I'd throw that one out there. We'll say that Garrett Wilson almost had an even bigger day. He did get tackled just short at the 1-yard line, so make sure you keep an eye out for him in our Tuesday Sheesh leaderboard. The Falcons took down the Buccaneers 31-26, covering as 1.5-point faves. The over did cash here as well at 47.5. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 touchdowns from Captain Kirk. 1 to Darnell Mooney, 1 to Bijan Robinson. That really was hilarious, Dwayne. I called it a sassy touchdown. It was almost like the Lamar Jackson high school play where he just stops on a dime, player goes running right by him, and then waltzes into the end zone. So cool stuff from Bijan, continuing to play really good football and found his way to 100 total yards, despite, again, continuing to lose some work to Tyler Algier. But, man, pull up any rushing leaderboard with whatever advanced metric you want. Good chance you're going to see Tyler Algier near the top. So we know we're kind of getting Bijan at this point. What we didn't know we were maybe getting, Dwayne, is 2 touchdowns in 1 game from Mr. Kyle Pitts. And honestly, as much as this year, we do a pretty good job, I think, of pointing out what tight ends are maybe getting gifted some yards, the Tucker Kraft sort of situation that we have going on a lot. And Pitts hasn't been a stranger to that himself. But, man, today it looked like the Buccaneers were having a lot of problems covering a big, beastly, athletic tight end. And that's what we've been hoping to see out of Kyle Pitts really for his entire career. So, Dwayne, breakout game from Pitts. Again, he's been getting a few more check down targets in these other games too. I know a lot of us were feeling like we were kind of out on the guy after the first 3-4 weeks. Not that we've dropped him too far down our ranks. I don't think he's ever fallen out of the top 8, even through some of the struggles. But are you ready to start buying back into the belief that maybe, just maybe, we could be looking at a guy with legit overall tight end 1, finishes in his potential range of outcomes?
I mean, maybe. I feel like he's a mid-range tight end 1. Like, as far as comparing him to history, like this year, might it work out? I mean, I don't know, man. Like, you got Kelsey, you got Bowers, you got McBride. I wouldn't move him ahead of, God, Kittle. Yeah. Kittle's at the top.
Njoku now too, bro.
And now Njoku. See, I can't put him ahead of any of those.
Yeah, but he might be right after him.
Yeah, he might be in the same group as like Evan Ingram, right? And a few other guys. So again, mid-range tight end 1. He's got an 18% target share over the last 4 games. So, I mean, he's pretty much kind of where he's been. He's just come through with some of these bigger plays, gotten a little bit lost in coverage, and again, to his credit, like Kyle Pitts is one of these unique guys, Ian, that can work vertically down the seam. Hasn't all worked out, but we did talk about theoretically with a guy like Kirk Cousins, once they got on the same page, man, that could really unlock a massive ceiling. So I do think that the boom games could continue to be bigger than what we got used to. And maybe the floor is slightly higher. So yeah, he gets a slight upgrade. It's just hard because the top now is suddenly jammed with 4 or 5 guys we really love at tight end. So yeah, I would say mid-range tight end 1. I don't know what happened. You may have seen something on this. Like, I don't know if he got benched after, basically fumbling the ball nearly at the 1-yard line, but only had a 59% route participation today. He's been around 80%. So that that was kind of a head scratcher. But over the last 3 games, again, like averaging 16.1 fantasy points per game. So I mean, you're feeling really great about it. If he's on your team, like you're starting him every week and feeling fine about it. It's hard to move him much further than we've got him though.
Similar sentiment for Drake London, although obviously we didn't get the production we wanted to today. But guys, he had 6 straight games with at least 6 catches coming to this one. I think he was the overall wide receiver 3. So I know 34 scoreless yards, not feeling great. Not going to be adjusting him down the ranks though. Similarly, Dwain, I don't think we're going to be booming Darnell Mooney up, even though it was nice to see him get some of that production, 92 yards and a touchdown. And just, man, like watching him on the all-22 film, especially during the week, there's at least 1 or 2 crispy comeback routes from this dude each and every week out, continuing to prove that, yeah, maybe some of us out there, me, okay, a little bit of an idiot, thought the Falcons paid him a little bit too much money in free agency, but he is earning every dollar so far this year. So again, Dwain, Mooney, someone that I think we upgraded into kind of like that upside wide receiver 3, borderline wide receiver 2 territory back in week 3 or week 4. Think he's still, remaining there, and we're feeling good about that.
Yeah, and I think, that's kind of the point of the utilization report, like, as we try not to overreact to a lot of these things, and we've just kept him right there in that wide receiver 3 range. Even though, he's kind of bounced around in his production, but like all the underlying data has been pretty good. I accidentally shot a stray his way. I wasn't meaning to, but like when I said, hey, I'm playing Puka Nacua no matter what, and people were asking me over who, and I'm like, look, I'm not benching Puka Nacua for, Darnell Mooney. Like half the receivers in the league are hurt. Puka Nacua ended up being a fine hit in that game, but Darnell Mooney still ended up outscoring him for the week. So if you're listening, Chad Schroeder, you were right on Darnell Mooney over Puka Nacua.
The great Chad Schroeder. Shout out to one of the goats of our lovely industry. Over on the other sideline, Dwain, Baker Mayfield, not falling off, keeping on.
This is amazing, dude.
4th straight game with at least 3 passing touchdowns. He now has a league high 49 since week 1 of last season. Now, took him 50 attempts to get there today. But man, Dwain, whether it's Kate Auden, who caught 2 out there on National Tight End Day, whether it's Rachaad White, who gets more easy, just chunk gains in the flats than any running back I've seen in the league this year. Baker Mayfield, man, continuing to field a pretty freaking great offense for the Buccaneers. What a time to be alive.
Yeah, I get it. Like the volume had to be there today, but still, I mean, this guy has thrown for over 300 yards in 4 out of the last five games. He's got 347 and 2 touchdowns, 180 against the Falcons, but he threw 3 touchdowns that game. 325 and 4, 370 and 3, 330 and 3. Now we're getting more of the YOLO Baker over these last 3 games. The picks are definitely there.
Yeah.
3, 2, and 2. So I mean, he was kind of keeping the picks clean early in the year, but now he's just out there balling, doing his thing. He's like, I mean, we like this kind of quarterback. This is like the Jameis Winston style of quarterback. Yeah. Like they're going to throw some turnovers, but they're really good for fantasy football, really good for your receivers. And the reason why is because he's not afraid to throw the ball in there against anyone. Some of those things turn into picks, but for other quarterbacks in the league right now, Ian, those turn into checkdowns. And Jameis Winston and Baker Mayfield, they're not doing that. Joe Flacco, when he gets on the field, he's also not doing that. These guys are letting it all hang out, and that is really good for your fantasy wide receivers.
Vanilla Jameis doing his thing. Got that, 9-figure contract this offseason, and I'm sure that does help you maybe rip one deep into that tight window as opposed to always taking the check down. So still were plenty of check downs out there. Rachaad White, again, caught 5 passes. Bucky Irving actually caught 7, Dwain. Did not seem to be impacted at all by that toe issue. We weren't even sure if he was going to play, and he looked great out there.
He looks fantastic. He looks so much better than Rachaad White. Like it's not close. You had a pretty funny tweet about it. It's
dogs.
Anyone with eyeballs can see the difference in these 2 guys. And I mean, maybe he is hurt and he still looks 50 times better than Rachaad White. So I don't know. He did lead the backfield today. Like it wasn't like by a huge amount, but despite the fact that he was dealing with an injury, from a rushing attempt standpoint, he had 43% of the carries, 29% to Rachaad White. Then we had Sean Tucker kicking in 10%. So we've really seen Bucky lead the way over Rachaad White. It's kind of like what we talked about with the Jaguars between Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne. I really do think that at this point, you just look at Bucky Irving as being the guy that's going to get the most carries on the team. The problem is there's still 2 other guys involved. Yeah. So we're not seeing him get to that 60-70% range. And at least Tank Bigsby has that upside. It feels like Irving right now, for now, is capped at probably like 45 to 50% is like what you're hoping for max. It helps when you have a trailing game strip like this and all the running backs get involved in the check down pass game.
I will say it's just good news that Sean Tucker isn't making this the three-headed committee that we
Yeah.
thought he might. So that's good news. But
Still
yeah,
a little bit, but yeah, not to the point we thought that it might be. Yes.
it's going to be tough to get Bucky inside the top 20. That said, you're feeling good about him as a flex moving forward. Is that
Yeah.
fair?
Yep, for sure.
Bang, bang. Otherwise, with the Buccaneers, again, mentioned the big day from Cade Otton. Didn't exactly catch us by surprise that he wound up being the essential #1 pass catcher with both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin out of the picture. What do we see from the rest of these wide receivers, though, Dwain? Because Lord knows they weren't very productive out there. I am assuming it was Jalen McMillan, Trey Palmer, and Sterling Shepard, though, in the full-time roles. And by the way, if Sterling did miss some routes, he had a hamstring injury that he did return from. So if his route rate is down, that's probably why.
Yeah, it is down. I think he missed 2 drives.
Okay.
I can't be for sure. Like when I was looking at it earlier and I was kind of having to go fast, it looked like it might've been 2 drives. But Jalen McMillan led the way with a 92% route participation. Like you mentioned,
Nice.
didn't do a lot in fantasy. You would think if you told me that Baker Mayfield was going to throw for 330 yards in this game, like I'd probably be feeling pretty good about Jalen McMillan coming through with 15 fantasy points. He gave you 9.2. So wasn't a complete dud. And he's still the lead guy. I know a lot of people put more money on Jalen McMillan than Cedric Tillman, and it feels like a really gross thing right now. We leaned to Tillman, but we knew it was a close call. And so I would just say, don't give up completely right now. I mean, we know Chris Godwin's gone, unfortunately, for the season, and Jalen McMillan was the #1 guy out there from a route participation standpoint. He had a 15% target share, Ian. So that was second on the team as well, behind Cade Otton, who had a 21.7 target share. Trey Palmer was out there doing, filling in for Mike Evans, 78% route participation for him. Didn't have any targets, 4%, only 4.9 fantasy points. And you mentioned Sterling Shepard. He had a couple targets, just wasn't able to do very much with it.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Sterling Shepard, 74% route participation, 60% from the slot. So he was the guy getting that slot work, wasn't able to do much with it as well. Only 4.8 fantasy points. He had an 11% target share. So going forward, the way I would, look at this pecking order, I really do think is probably Cade Otton and Jalen McMillan. And then you have the other 2 guys until we get Mike Evans back. So again, if you can afford to not drop Jalen McMillan, I think it's look, guys, target shares can bounce around. Target shares are things that like 1 week a guy can, we just talked about with Drake London. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's been at 25, 30% for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and he has a bad game. It can happen. I'm not saying that Jalen McMillan's going to be awesome, but it's just his first game out here. I mean, so having a 15% target share is not terrible. And it could have been worse. And there's still a chance, like he's a 20% guy moving forward. So if you can afford to hold on to him, try to do that.
Only thing I will say is with Shepard, yes, he was the major slot player with 27 total snaps, I should say, but still had 19 for McMillan and also had
33% for McMillan.
Yeah, so it's not like we have Shepard running 95% of his routes in the slot, the only guy in there. They're spreading it around, and I am with Dwain. I do think McMillan is still the guy you want to have your chip down, but hey, certainly an offense more than willing to spread the ball around to its various talented running backs and Cade Otton. They're facing the Chiefs in Arrowhead next Monday night, so probably won't be a gimme matchup there, but hey, wouldn't put anything past Baker at this point. The Packers took down the Jaguars 30-27. Jax did cover as 3.5-point dogs. Good for them. Over cash with relative ease at 49. So was another back and forth performance, but unfortunately, Dwain did not have Jordan Love for a large portion of the second half. Suffered a groin injury seemingly earlier in the game because we actually have Matt LaFleur tell Fox that Love can't really move and they were going to have to, adjust the play calling accordingly in the second half. Luckily, later LaFleur did say, well, not LaFleur. Tom Pelissero said there's optimism he avoided the long-term injury. We'll undergo tests on Monday, so we will see. So as we saw earlier in this year, when Jordan Love is out, the Packers become a pretty, run-heavy offense, right? I think it was something like they had some blowout game scripts going, but I want to say they only threw the ball on something like 27% of their snaps with Malik under center, which is just shockingly low. But that said, man, Malik Willis was doing his thing out there with his opportunities, and we even saw some of that today. 56 yards passing on just 5 attempts and a touchdown. Also chipped in 23 yards on the ground. So if we are going to lose Love for at least a game or two, Dwain, it becomes that much tougher to trust these pass catchers and everything. But should we be so quickly to maybe, put Malik Willis down? Because I'm not saying he's Justin Fields or anything like that, but hey, first couple games this year, man, looked like a pretty darn good fantasy producer.
Yeah, I think Malik Willis himself might be fine for fantasy, right? He's shown that, to your point. But it is going to downgrade all the receivers. Like I pretty much don't want to touch any of the Packers receivers other than like you're going to run Jaden Reed out there. But It's not as bad as like an Anthony Richardson kind of thing. But man, it's just it adds so much volatility. You know, he was pretty accurate earlier in the season, so he was hitting the big plays. At least he had that going for him. But to your point, just because they try to run the ball so much. I did have a couple of other quick notes here on the passing game, and then we can jump into the running backs. But it was Romeo Doubs leading the way with a 97% route participation. That's pretty much what we've seen. He's been the leading guy. You know, that was a season high, though. But he has been the main guy on the field. Didn't do a ton, 10.2 fantasy points. I know you're probably hoping for more against the Jaguars defense. That didn't come to fruition. We had Christian Watson, though, Ian, with a 77% route participation, and Dontavian Wicks was at 30%.
Ooh.
I have no idea how to forecast this thing. I mean, I don't know if it comes down to the way they're playing in the games, if it comes down to the matchups they're looking at. I really don't know. It's kind of all over the place. But right now, it would appear that maybe Christian Watson has a slight leg back up over Dontavian Wicks. If we ever got to a point to where one of these guys emerged, like over a 2 or 3 game stretch, as being the other outside wide receiver, we could get behind it, you know, because if we have once you have Jordan Love back under center. But right now, it's still just a little bit too iffy to try to get either one of these guys into your fantasy lineups if you can avoid it.
Even Jaden Reed, man, not exactly giving us those same sort of early season fireworks. And I do
Only
believe
67%, man, route participation. Yeah. And that's a challenge. That's a big challenge, man. Jaden Reed is a really good player, but he was due for regression. Yeah. And a lot of it was due to his target share was not high. His targets per route run were not high, and his routes weren't high. Yeah. So he was just really living on the big play. And it's hard to take that. We don't take that away from a player. And the utilization score accounts for it. But at the same time, you just have to know volatility is going to come with a player like that.
And he did help partially save his day with a big play, 51-yard catch and run to help set up that game-winning field goal. But yeah, again, not exactly anyone being overly prioritized in this Packers offense. Nobody had more than 6 targets on the day. It was tied between Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. We did see Tucker Kraft, though, Dwain, make the most out of his opportunities, caught all 3 of his targets, 78 yards and a touchdown. Was he really covered on any of the plays?
I don't think so.
No.
But hey, all I'm going to say at this point is like it's getting schemed up in a way where like, okay, maybe he's just going to be uncovered the rest of the season. I don't know. But I mean, a guy with an 11% target share shouldn't be scoring 17 fantasy points, but he continues to do it. And that's what he gets every week is like an 11% target share. And this dude still comes through. So look, I don't know what to say. I'm still calling him a low end tight end 1. He's a boom bust kind of guy, but right now, man, he's booming.
He's not that different from like a Jake Ferguson out there. We know there's a higher target ceiling for Ferguson, but you know, it's a Packers offense that we want to be involved with. So yeah, there are going to be games where we only have 3 or 4 targets, but hey, if you're going to take 3 or 4 targets, Dwain, Packers offense, one of those that we would be more willing to get behind. So obviously it does deserve some, you know, just praise for his yak skills. We'll see if the, again, South Dakota State Jackrabbit can continue keeping on.
It's going to regress, but whatever. Like I'm with you. It's the Packers offense is the main thing. When you have Jordan Love out there, go with it. But he is going to regress. I will guarantee it. Like he's not keeping this up for the rest of the season. He's going to have a string of duds. It's going to happen. I don't want to wish it on the guy, but like just the way the Packers spread the ball. Look, it's happening to Jaden Reed. It's going to happen to Tucker Kraft.
I do think Luke Musgrave's going to be back before too long as well, and that could make life even more tough for Tucker Kraft. So Packers, again, get that, not prime time, but really exciting, you know, matchup next week for potentially control of the NFC North against the Detroit Lions. Hopefully, again, Jordan Love will be healthy enough for that one. Over with the Jaguars, another pretty damn good performance from Trevor Lawrence, Dwain. You know, had the interception out there, couldn't get the win, but going down there at the end and briefly tying things up thanks to a freaking sweet contested catch touchdown from Evan Ingram. I mean, again, after the first couple weeks of the year, I know you were praying that we could just get 225 passing yards out of Trevor Lawrence. And with 308 today, and again, a lot of other pretty good games before that, he's at least proven that, you know, he can help maintain some semblance of a fantasy-friendly offense in Jacksonville. If he has anyone healthy enough to throw to, I mean, my God, dude, Gabe Davis re-aggravated his shoulder injury. Christian Kirk suffered a shoulder injury that Dr. Jeff Mueller does have concern that it could be a higher grade left AC sprain, even a clavicle fracture. Dr. Mueller, great Twitter follow, by the way, does expect Kirk to miss some time. And even Brian Thomas Jr., man, suffered a chest injury. He was ruled questionable. I did not see if he was actually able to return to the game after that. So it could be a rib issue. Hopefully we get BTJ back out there, man. Because again, the whole Brian Thomas Jr. versus Marvin Harrison Jr. thing, I know it's fun and we're debating it and all that, but just putting Maserati Marv aside, man, just the things Brian Thomas Jr. has done, particularly over the last month and a half, truly, truly impressive from the young rookie.
Yeah, I mean, he came out again today with a 20% targets per route run. You mentioned it. The guy ended up getting hurt, so he was only out there. Sorry, 25% targets per route run, but he only had a 47% route participation because of the injury. So yeah, I mean, he's a baller, and like talk about a dude that just somehow winds up behind coverage so often. You know, you're just like, dang, like how did that happen? And yeah, Trevor Lawrence loves to look for him once they get down in the red zone. So that's a big thing as well for Thomas. So hopefully he will be healthy and he will be back out there. If we do get a situation in where this thing gets condensed down and you're missing Gabe Davis, not that Gabe Davis was stealing a lot of targets, but he was definitely stealing routes. Yeah. If you could get Brian Thomas Jr. out there and for some reason Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk were not out there, like we want all these guys to get healthy, but man, if Trevor Lawrence, you know, he's shown two of the last 4 games, he's shown to have a 300-yard passing ceiling. Now, he also had a game where he didn't even get to 200 yards in that same stretch. So I think he's still going to be a little more boom bust, but at least we know the ceiling's there. So if you had that kind of game where suddenly you get a 300-yard passing game and it's just Brian Thomas Jr. and Evan Ingram out there, we saw last year down the stretch when that offense consolidated around just a couple of players, like, man, you can get a lot of fantasy points out of it. So I would say Evan Ingram, if you were missing Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis and potentially Brian Thomas Jr., like he's going to be like right there next to David Njoku. We're going to be feeling the same way, essentially, just other than the fact that we feel a little bit better about Jameis Winston than we do Trevor Lawrence, which feels weird to say, but we're talking about fantasy.
BTJ, 4 of his last 5 weeks now, pre-Sunday Night Football with top 15 finishes at the position. 3 of those were actually top 10. So, you know, said before he was knocking on that wide receiver 1 door. Dude, it really is looking like he's about ready to kick that thing in if we can just, to Dwayne's point, get those targets a bit more consolidated because nobody on the Jags had more than 5 targets out there. And guess what, Dwayne? Tied for the team high was Brenton Strange. Are we cutting down Ingram's routes now?
I know. No, he was good. He had 88% route participation and it was still fine. Like he had 17% targets. You know, if you look at Ingram over these last 3 games since he's been back, like he's still averaging over 20% target share. So yeah, Brenton Strange. Yeah, that was kind of wild for him to get out. He only had a 35% route participation, but had a 17% target share. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, dude, to give that guy credit, like he did pretty. Yeah, they had to use more 12 personnel and stuff because the other guys all got hurt.
Yeah.
And so Strange becomes the guy that gets lost in the mix. Imagine like you have no Christian Kirk, you have no Brian Thomas Jr., no Gabriel Davis. Where are you going to focus your coverage? On freaking Evan Ingram. And even that touchdown catch he had was minimum double coverage, maybe triple.
Yeah. But hey, good ball, you know, putting it up there where only Ingram could get it, and boy, did he ever. So last note here would be the backfield. Obviously, Travis Etienne continuing to miss time, was seemingly set up as a game-time decision. So, Dwayne, I would not be shocked if he is back in week 9 for the Jaguars matchup against the Eagles. But again, just judging on the box score, we've seen 2 games now really without Etienne. He got hurt very early in that, you know, second London one, or maybe it was the first one, where we had the Dearness Johnson game where he really kind of took over. But, you know, it's not like this game was ever that far out of stretch, but did we see more of a shift to the Tank Bigsby workhorse role, Dwayne? Because again, 18 carries and just 1 for DeHonest. And man, even seeing Bigsby get 3 targets out there, you know, despite being maybe the worst receiving back in the league, good to see from, again, this handcuff who keeps on putting on some at least pretty heavy usage performances.
DeHonest Johnson. You know something about this guy? I don't. He's not. He doesn't lie. Apparently, DeHonest Johnson. Yeah, Bigsby, man. You mentioned it. I mean, the 18 carries to 1, 78% of the team's rushing attempts, and he had 66% of the snaps, 44% route participation, which was still beat by Mr. DeHonest at 47%. So yeah, it's the same that we've seen. Really, you got Johnson coming in, taking some of those passing down reps, but really Tank Bigsby being the lead back on the early down stuff. And had a couple of chances to score a touchdown. Dude keeps those legs churning, man. He got really close on one of them. I thought he was going to get it with one last little push. I was, you know, I get so used to now waiting for the offensive lineman to just come in and shove these guys in. It like happens all the time, you know, in today's game. We didn't quite get there, but still, Bigsby, yeah, the lead early down back for the team. And I think even once Travis Etienne gets back, I mean, we'll have to be a little more conservative in our projection for Bigsby. But again, I have a feeling, Ian, he's taken that over. I think he still might be like a 55, 60% guy with really ETN taking the passing down reps.
Let's move on to some AFC South goodness. The Texans took down the Colts 23-20. Indy did cover as 4.5-point dogs. The under cashed at 45. The only under that cashed during the 1 p.m. slate. And yeah, got to see CJ Stroud, throw for over 100 yards, Dwain. In fact, he got all the way up there to 285, looking much more like the quarterback who we've seen far more times than not. Again, after that disappointing performance in Lambeau last week. So good stuff from Stroud. Found Stephon Diggs on 9 targets, 81 yards. Tank Dell caught a touchdown. Even Dalton Schultz had a season high 52 yards. Unfortunately, though, Dwayne, the injury gods may have cursed us again because Stephon Diggs did suffer a non-contact knee injury that did not look good. The primary concern is indeed for an ACL injury per Dr. Mueller. Did say maybe if we get lucky, though, it could just be a meniscus issue. So prayers up for Stephon Diggs. Obviously, ceiling was the roof in Fantasyland, and just, guy that's been giving the Texans, a lot of good reps this year in real life as well, obviously. So, Dwayne, when we did see Stephon Diggs out, looking, just on the television, seemed like it was John Mechie who was getting some more run, but what did we actually see in terms of the route rates?
Yeah, it was really Xavier Hutchinson that took over 64% route participation for him. And then behind him, we had Mechie at 21% and then Robert Woods at 18%. But it's also one of these things where we don't know for sure how they'll handle it in the games moving forward once they've had a week to get prepared and all those things. But I will say Hutchinson now in multiple weeks has kind of looked like he might be the next guy up if that's who they need. So if we were forecasting it today and we're saying we got to project next week, which we'll be working on soon enough, I would have Xavier Hutchinson down as the guy that would be the wide receiver 2 if we are missing Stephon Diggs. Tank Dell today, man, only a 13% target or 11% target share, 13% targets per route run. He did come through and he gave you the touchdown. But man, we had that one game, 2 weeks ago when we had Nico Collins out, and then it's not worked out so far for Stephon Diggs. I mean, not Stephon Diggs, but for Tank Dell. So I don't know for sure what's going on. Diggs was having a great day. He was at a 25% target share when he left the game, 32% targets per route run. He was absolutely balling out. So hate to see that. We've had enough of these wide receiver injuries, hoping that it's not something serious for Stephon Diggs. Doesn't sound very promising, though.
Tough matchup for the Texans. Short week as well next Thursday night at the New York Jets. So sounds like, Dwayne, again, Tank Dell going to be someone who I'm sure is still in far more starting lineups than not.
Yeah.
But even with Diggs out, doesn't sound like you're going to be willing to push him up into the top 50.
Well, man, we've been so look, we've been in on Dell. And so sometimes like when you do that multiple times, like you feel like you got CJ Stroud. We know what they did together last year. I mean, it's feeling a little more right now. It's starting to feel a little bit more like an Elijah Moore thing, where we had a really big, burst at the end of a rookie season. And then next year we kept waiting and hoping. We're like, oh, Elijah Moore can't just suddenly be bad, can he? Yeah, you might be. Now today, of course, with Jameis Winston, Elijah Moore was good again. So looking at Tank Dell, I feel like we at least have to acknowledge that like we're at this fork in the road where he could go either way. He could still get himself back on track. We could still feel great about it. But there's also this chance that maybe Tank Dell isn't who we thought he was. I think that's the spot that we're at right now with him. Very similar to Elijah Moore.
Obviously, injuries could be playing a role as well. I do agree the eye test hasn't been quite as clean as it did seem like during his rookie season. Still, only week 8. So if he goes ahead and puts together a nice second half stretch, I think we will forget all about this relative slow run he is on.
It'll be hard to move him down. Because if Diggs is out, it's like, okay, like he has Tank
throw the ball too. Yeah,
I know. So it's like we were already starting to move Tank Dell down. And then Nico left. And we're like, oh, we'll move Tank Dell back up again. And now we're to the point, well, maybe we need to move Tank Dell down again. And then now we're not going to have Stephon Diggs most likely. So we'll see. Probably one more week of keeping him in that low end wide receiver 2 range. But if he burns everybody next week, even in a tough matchup, man, it's going to be really tough then.
And again, just unfortunate because this was an easy matchup. This was a game you would have circled saying Stroud's going for 350 and 4 touchdowns out here. Was not the case today. So I would still expect, some better days ahead for Schultz and Dell because who else are going to throw the ball to at this point? But yeah, certainly a disappointing 1 week sample there. Not a disappointing sample though for Joe Mixon, Dwayne, who just keeps on keeping on. 102 yards on the ground and also 32 through the air as well. So again, someone who I think I actually straight up ranked as the RB1 this week, but man, whether you want to rank him RB1, RB5, dude is absolutely balling out here.
Top 3.
Top 3.
Top 3 rest of the way.
Don't need to bicker about that one. Over with the Colts, another just Anthony Richardson performance, man. 10 of 32,
Woo.
175 yards, 1 touchdown on 1 pick. I will say, though, there's a lot of sheesh. All right. Early on,
Yeah.
there's a beautiful 30-yard ball down the sideline to A.D. Mitchell. Could not get the feet down in bounds, even though the throw was, again, good enough to be a touchdown. Later, Tyler Goodson dropped what should have been a 25-yard touchdown down the sideline. And we even had a sick Josh Downs catch where he ended up getting rolled just short. So, again, really could have been a 3-touchdown day with over 200 yards from Anthony Richardson. But Dwain, even explaining all that, all right, now we're talking about him being what, 13 for 32. Like, it's been erratic.
I was about to say, what is adjusted completion percentage after all your work there, Hartitz?
It's been erratic. It's just been weird, man. He pulled himself out of the game because he just
tired.
Quote, needed a break right there. Call timeout, man. You're the quarterback. What are we doing? So vibes aren't matching it. 45 rushing yards. Okay, we'll take that. I'm sure he actually had something close to, a QB1 performance after a couple duds. So good to at least see him not kill us, Dwain. But again, those top 5 fantasy heights that, again, based on his rookie season, certainly seem there for the taking, looking further away than ever right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, he came out and he gave you 11.5 fantasy points today. So he scored 26 in week 1. Then he scored 9.9. Okay. And then we've got 5.1, 5.2, 8.8. And then we've got 11.5. Now, one of those games he left with an injury. But still, I mean, dude, I don't know. Like, I don't know what to do with him.
They took 2 off for that. Yeah, he had a BS fumble on the last play.
Yeah, we are
it counts.
We are truly stretching the bounds of you could be as bad as Tim Tebow and still be a top 12 fantasy corp. That's what he is right now. He's Tim Tebow.
I think Tebow had a better completion rate, man.
I think he did. So yeah, man, it's a struggle bus. I look, Anthony Richardson's still a borderline QB1 just because we know the data going so far back, man. It is so hard to not be a top 10, top 12 quarterback when you're going to run the ball like he does. But the thing is, man, like, he's not consistently giving us these big rushing performances. So like we at least need some more there. I think we're ready to face reality. He's not going to suddenly become a good passer this year. You can't go from being a 44% guy. Maybe you get to 48%. We'll take it. Maybe you could improve that much, but he's not going to suddenly become a great passer this year. He could have some boom games, to your point, because like he can hit the big plays and there were some drops in this game. And if you get those, like, no one cares about the completion percentage in fantasy, right? It's like, okay, we still got our points and you're good. But man, like, this is absolutely brutal, a 31% completion rate today. So like, look, I can't tell people they have to start him anymore. That's the bottom line. He's not a must start. You can bench Anthony Richardson, which we've really been saying for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But I think now, like, I wouldn't argue with anybody if they're just like, I don't have the stomach for it. I'll just be like, all right, fine, don't do it.
Vikings, Bills, and Jets next 3 up. Don't think we're going to see that completion percentage of flip-flop in those matchups, Dwain. Just going to put that one out there. I mentioned Downs with the, near second touchdown. I mean, even the first touchdown, man, there's no one within freaking 20 yards of Downs.
Yeah.
And you could even argue that Richardson underthrew that ball a little bit. So was still a nice 69-yard touchdown. Good to see Downs rack up some air yards out there and had a good day. But, if you guys were confidently starting Josh Downs in your flex, good for you, because, I don't think many of us had the balls to do just that. So no other Colts wide receiver managed to reach even 20 yards. Yikes. So also we'll know Alec Pierce had a 14-yard touchdown nullified on an OPI that did spring him open, to be fair. And out of the top, when I pulled the data, Dwain, I don't think it had all the late afternoon games in there, but 3 of the top 6 wide receivers of the week in unrealized air yards were Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, and A.D. Mitchell. So just so
Might
much
be more prayer yards, though.
Yeah, definitely a lot of prayer yards out there. So again, depressing moments in the Colts passing game. Not so much in the backfield, though, Dwain. Jonathan Taylor returned and he looked healthy, forced a week high 10 missed tackles on the ground. We're back. RB1, baby.
Yeah, man. I mean, nothing really to add here. Looks like this guy's healthy. Comes out here, gets 80% of the rushing attempts, 83% snap share, 66% route participation. Guys, if he continues with that, even if Anthony Richardson's bad, it's going to be hard for him to be anything less than a top 6 running back. It's crowded up there this year, but like theoretically, that's the kind of those numbers say mid-range to high-end running back 1.
All right, guys, we got 5 late afternoon games to get to, but before we do that, I want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at DraftKings. A chill in the air, leaves falling to the ground, and football every weekend. That is what fall is all about, and you can make each weekend even more exciting by getting into the action with our partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet $5 will instantly get $200 in bonus bets. All you have to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using our promo code FantasyLife. The crown is yours. That's $200 in bonus bets instantly, and you can stay in on the action and use your $200 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. After all, DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have a shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code FantasyLife and bet just $5 on any wager to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FantasyLife only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The Chargers took down the Saints 26-8, covering with ease at 7.5-point faves. The under did cash here at 41.5. So another win for the now 4-3 Chargers, and another week, Dwain, where especially post-bye that Justin Herbert started to look a lot more like the quarterback who we knew he could be, and that he has been for the large portion of his early career, but finally starting to get some of that passing volume. I mean, 32 pass attempts, Dwain. It wasn't that long ago that felt like a bit of a pipe dream, and certainly making the most out of it. Also, 49 yards on the ground, had a 38-yard gallop out there as well. Truly looking healthy. So good stuff from Herbert. And no, don't think he's going to be cracking the top 10 anytime soon. But you know who could be rising up the ranks in a major way, Dwain? Ladd McConkey, not one but 2 touchdowns. Got stopped just short of the goal line on what could have even been a third. And my God, man, looks good out there. I know formerly of PFF, now with CBS, Mike Renner, one of the best draft analysts in the game. He was on record saying that McConkey honestly gave him some Antonio Brown vibes coming out as a prospect. And man, at least for one Sunday afternoon, Dwain, I kind of saw it out there. This dude is a baller.
Yeah, and he's still trying to get healthy. Like, he was on the injury report all this week. But he's a guy that we've been talking about for a few weeks, that in an alternate simulation, right, of an NFL season, he might be a wide receiver 1 because of the underlying data points that we had seen as far as his target share, as far as, his targets per route run, even what he was doing from an air yard standpoint, not just getting locked to this underneath, tethered to the line of scrimmage kind of thing. And that's one of the things that Renner and some of the other draft analysts were talking about. I know you even laid eyes on McConkey in the pre-draft process. I watched him some too, but a guy that can work that second layer of the field. I don't think he's going to beat you a ton down the field. He can do it occasionally. He can set those moves up, but he's not a guy that has to just be that kind of whip route underneath kind of gadget, or scam player. He's not a Scamdell Robinson. Okay. So McConkey, man, like, if we get this from Justin Herbert, and you mentioned it, since the bye, man, we've gotten from Herbert 237 passing yards. Doesn't sound like a lot, guys, but before that, he hadn't cleared 200 yards. The closest he had been is 179. And so he had 237 yards in week 6, then 349 in week 7. And he followed that up this weekend with 279 and 2 passing touchdowns. So I don't think we're going to continue to see that much from Herbert. But again, like, if we could get to 225, like 250, that's going to be enough for one player. That'll be enough for a player like Ladd. If it's a 225, that's enough for one guy like McConkey. If it's 250, there's enough room for 2 players to get going there. Now, we'll see what happens when they get Quentin Johnston back. He was really the top performer before he left. But yeah, man, I'm with you. Like, Ladd McConkey definitely gets another upgrade. We'll have to see. Do the Chargers continue to throw the ball a little? And they're still balanced. It's not like they just gave up on the run. I mean, he had 32 passing attempts today, which is high for the Chargers. But like, if you look across the league, like, you're looking at guys throwing the ball 40, 45 times to say it's high. But look, Justin Herbert's playing really good over this last little stretch. So yeah, we're gonna give an upgrade. It's nice to see McConkey, who was doing his part, now getting rewarded with an offense throwing the ball a little bit more. Today, he had a 20% target share. 79% route participation. So, I mean, still not like way up there in those numbers, but man, like, continuing to earn those targets and do something with them.
Just so gritty, man. Just, sneaky athletic, plays with such a high football IQ, deceptively fast, student of the game, a gamer, scrappy, coach's son, Patriots slot wide receiver. Okay, I'll stop. Thank you, everyone. Speaking of that run game, though, J.K. Dobbins did have, a nice afternoon at the office himself, 57 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Got, I believe, his second carry from inside the 5-yard line on the season. But honestly, man, they actually gave Hassan Haskins the first one out of this wonky T formation that Harbaugh probably got from his Michigan days. So wasn't easy, but Dobbins got across there and also chipped in 4 catches for 11 yards. So once again, continuing to get featured, and once again, going to be someone who should be in all lineups, of all shapes and sizes pretty much next week when the Chargers take on the Browns in Cleveland. So good stuff going on there. Keep an eye on the injury report because Herbert did get rolled up on, and then hilariously, their offensive lineman, I think it was Baseman, cleaned the clock of that Saints player, getting a little bit dirty there on the ground. So love seeing again the O lineman sticking up for their QB. That was a fun moment there, but didn't seem to impact Herbert for the rest of the game at least. Over in New Orleans, Dwayne, another day without Derek Carr. However, Dennis Allen did say that, he could be back ahead of week 9 when they face the Panthers, which I do think we would all really appreciate to get to take advantage of that, just softball in fantasy land. So at least for another day, though, Alvin Kamara doing his thing, 16 total touches, cleared the 100-yard mark, and continued to look pretty good out there, even though he is continuing to play through that hand and rib injury. So even if we haven't gotten the big-time boons from Kamara, you'd like to think that could be more so on the way with Derek Carr under center. The real story, though, Dwayne, was the return of Chris Olave coming off that concussion. 14 targets caught, 8 of them for 107 scoreless yards. Hopefully something that becomes a more weekly, just I guess what we expect on a weekly basis out of the guy, which he'd obviously done for the season.
Yeah, man. Chris Olave today had a 37% target share on a 94% route participation. And we've talked about this in the past, man. Chris Olave is a really good player. And we haven't got to see it fully come through, kind of like what people have been saying about Garrett Wilson up until recently. But the underlying data for a long time has told us that Chris Olave is a good player. So with Rashid Shaheed done for the season, once we get Derek Carr back, if they can throw for 225 yards per game, there's a lot of upside here for Olave. I mean, to come out here and do this in a game with Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener and put up 18.7 fantasy points, that's pretty impressive. So if you have Olave, obviously feeling pretty good about it. Mason Tipton was second in route participation today at 88%, but Bub Means did get hurt early in the game. So I don't know for sure what that would look like moving forward.
Next 6 games here for Olave, Dwayne: Panthers, Falcons, Browns, Rams, Giants, and Commanders, who are better and stuff. But man, wouldn't be shocked at all if we can see Olave actually provide some of the wide receiver one level numbers that I know a lot of you drafted him to be not too long ago. So think that about does it here. We do have some injuries to keep an eye on. Kendre Miller got ruled out with a hamstring injury. Dude was actually starting to look good. Yeah, I know it sucks.
He had a good run early. Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Also had Jawan Johnson being evaluated for concussion, could clear things up a little bit for Taysom Hill, who was out there catching 2 passes and also had 4 carries on the ground. So yes, indeed, Spencer Rattler was benched for Jake Haener, but again, fingers crossed we get Derek Carr back under center ahead of what should be a great matchup. I mean, Dwayne, I guess the Panthers next week, if Derek Carr is back, I know we got to go through the ranks and everything, but Olave is going to be really tough to keep out of the top 15. And, if you have a couple drinks before getting those ranks together, man, maybe even top 12.
Yeah, I think he's a lock to be a wide receiver 2 in that matchup. I mean, the question is, like, if you have Derek Carr back under center, and then if we get an offensive lineman or 2 back, like, how high is too high for Alvin Kamara in that matchup? I mean, that is going to be insane. But the good here, you just hit it though. The main thing now about the Saints offense is it's going to consolidate just around Kamara and Olave, and you're going to have to deal with the annoyance of Taysom Hill. Like, that's not going to go away, guys. Like, he was out there getting some work today. But you can deal with that when really everything else is channeling through your 2 players.
Obviously been quite the 6-game skid here for the Saints. Sorry, Cooter Doodle and the entire Doodle, family down there in the Bayou country. But yeah, man, hopefully Derek Carr's back. I can't believe how much hope we now have on Derek Carr coming back. But hey, that's just 2024 for you. The Bills took down the Seahawks 31-10, covering easily as 3-point faves. The under cashed here, though, at 45.5. So really it just seemed par for the course, Dwayne, in terms of Josh Allen being a great quarterback. Did throw his first interception of the year, but chipped in 283 yards with touchdowns to both Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid. Cracked me up when Keon Coleman scored, and he actually pulled like the Sean McVay on Kyle Shanahan, like, oh, you'll get him next time, kid, kind of playfully shoving the cornerback's head. Almost surprised he didn't get flagged for that one. But another nice performance again from the rookie. Led the, I think, league in receiving yards last week, and then 70 yards and a touchdown today. So really starting to, creep into that borderline wide receiver 3 conversation, as is Khalil Shakur. Caught 9 of 10 targets for for 107 yards out there. And dude, his just chemistry with Josh Allen is out of this world. I mean, I'm looking it up right now. He only let one ball hit the ground today. And yeah, coming into this game, Dwayne, he had caught 27 of 28 targets. So on the season now, he has caught 36 of 38 targets. That's hard for running backs to do, let alone an actual wide receiver doing things downfield. So great stuff from Shakur, great stuff from Keon Coleman, and oh yeah, not so much great stuff from Amari Cooper. Just one catch for 3 scoreless yards. I did not see any injuries reported. However, I did see someone wondering if he got a stinger, took kind of a weird hit, went down, didn't seem to miss any snaps. But what we see out there, Dwayne, because what if these snaps are going to go up, and just based on the box score, did not seem like that was the case.
Yeah, still third in route participation at 65%. It will be interesting to hear if there was an injury, but this is not necessarily uncommon, right? Again, second game with the Bills. And we talked about it because we had talked, okay, is it time to move Amari Cooper up into, higher in the ranks? And it was like, well, we probably really need to see another game from him. Now, heading into this next one, it'll be 3 games. I would feel a little bit more comfortable with Amari, but I'm not going to worry about this too much. I still think Amari Cooper is going to lead this team in targets once he's in his groove. He's playing full-time role. He's getting the snaps. So just don't want to overreact to a small sample. Real quick on Khalil Shakir, like, you're right. Like, whenever he's healthy and doing his thing, like, he's by far Josh Allen's favorite guy. Now, Keon Coleman has come over the last couple of games, but 31% target share for him today. Now, not hard to catch all of them today because average depth of target 1.9. Like,
that is running back.
That is a running back. Yeah, exactly. But that's not what he's been doing all year. He's obviously not been the deep threat, but he is a guy that's worked, intermediate and underneath. So Khalil Shakir, man, looking really good. If you didn't have Amari Cooper on the team, of not potentially, but eventually ascending up the roster, up the ranks, you would feel a lot better about Shakir. We might be calling him a borderline wide receiver 2. And I'll just say real quick on the passing game stuff, man. Apparently, like, we didn't get the memo, but the NFL just banned, the 2 high safeties, because Josh Allen now, the last 2 games, 323 yards, 283 yards. I think the offenses are starting to click, Ian, and they're finding the counterpunch. And also a lot of it was probably just overreacting to offenses not really playing that good early in the year. And that kind of thing can just happen. But it's nice to see these quarterbacks coming out and putting up, over 300 yards per game. Like this weekend, man, we had 4 guys throw for over 200 or over 300. And then we had another 7 throw for 275 or more. So we had a lot of guys putting up yardage in the passing game this weekend.
Can't believe you would imply the football world would overreact to anything, Dwayne. That's just not like any of us. Come on, man. James Cook, another big game, 17 carries, 111 yards, not 1, but 2 touchdowns on the ground. Now has 8 total scores this year. He only had 9 in his previous 33 games in the 2022 and 2023 season. So certainly looking like a gem of a mid-round fantasy pick. And yes, Ray Davis still making the most out of his opportunities, but make no mistake about it, still very much the James Cook RB1 show, and accordingly feeling great about him in fantasy moving forward. So Bills versus the Dolphins next week. Not exactly seeing, again, a battle for first place or anything like that with how bad the rest of the AFC East has been, but at a minimum should be another chance for the Bills offense to flex their muscles against the Dolphins defense that, injuries and just not being all that good this year has made them a group to target. Over with the Seahawks, Dwayne, seems like a situation where, again, it wasn't just a good afternoon at the office. We've seen the Bills defense honestly do this to some good groups over the years, so I'm not going to overreact to it. But yeah, Geno Smith, 212 scoreless yards through the air. Jackson Smith and the Jigba caught 6 of 7 targets for 69 yards. Tyler Lockett unfortunately dudded with just 1 catch for 9 scoreless yards. So Kenneth Walker, man, could not get anything going on the ground. 9 carries for 12 yards. Probably still racked up like 5 broken tackles along the way. He still had some of his patented runs and everything, but hey, man, at least for a day, wasn't the biggest performance. Still did chip in 4 catches for 33 yards. I know coming into this game, he was actually 3rd among all running backs in PPR points per game from just receiving. So again, really good to see him have that floor. But yeah, when Zach Charbonnet got that goal line touchdown late instead of Walker, well, that's how you do get a dud at the fantasy office. So anything too big here, Dwayne? I guess the only real utilization note would be what happened at wide receiver with DK Metcalf sidelined.
No, I think actually the big thing here is over the last 2 games, Kenneth Walker's got a 50% snap share. So we talked about it last week that maybe there's trying to go back more to a 2-way committee. And so now we've got 2 weeks in a row where we've now seen this. In fact, Zach Charbonnet's outsnapped him over that period. Now, some of that I haven't gone to check. Maybe they pulled Kenneth Walker out of the game really late here because it was out of hand. So there might be some of that going on, but just to see it get closer, right? We had really seen him kind of move ahead, and he had distanced himself pretty far from Charbonnet. Still fine, 23 carries versus 10 for Charbonnet over this 2-game stretch. So still the lead back as far as, getting those rushing attempts, but the route participation over these last 2 games down to 37% for Kenneth Walker versus 42% for Charbonnet. So it does look like they might be leaning back into Charbonnet, trying to give him a little bit of work in the passing game. We'll have to monitor it, but it is going to be a slight downgrade for Kenneth Walker for me in the utilization report this week. And then as far as the passing goes, looking over at the offense without Mr. DK Metcalf, a lot of people were looking at it thinking this should be a day where we see plenty of Tyler Lockett. You did. He was on the field, guys. He was out there for an 80% route participation, but only a 16% target share on the day. Wasn't able to. Oh, sorry. That's over the last 2 weeks. I was just going to say it was higher than that when I looked earlier. It was in the 90s. So, yeah, 97% route participation, but only 11% target share. Jackson Smith and Jigba, basically in his same role, but had a 26% target share. So he picked up a little bit more work with DK Metcalf out. Unfortunately, Ian, still not able to turn it into much. He got close. I thought for a second he was going to have a chance to score a touchdown. Then he went down around the 2 or the 3 yard line. He scored 12.9 fantasy points today, and it was Mr. Jake Bobo with an 81% route participation. Didn't do anything for you, but if you don't have DK Metcalf next week and you're looking for a punt play in DFS, maybe it's Jake Bobo. I don't know.
Certainly has a smashable enough matchup against that ever leaky Los Angeles Rams secondary. So we will continue to monitor DK's practice participation throughout the week. I will say he was, kind of shaping up as that game time decision as play here. So I would kind of expect him to be back out there. 3 more games, everyone. Appreciate you tuning with us, as always, on the Fantasy Life Show. The Broncos beat down the Panthers 28-7, covering as 12.5-point favorites. The under cash here at 40.5. So another really great game from Bo Nix, who might have went ahead and after round and been the #1 fantasy quarterback on the week. I know a lot of people were streaming him, and accordingly, it worked out for you. 284 passing yards, 3 touchdowns through the air, and as he has been known to do this year, chipped in another score on the ground. And honestly, Dwain, okay, I will admit, I try to keep an eye on 4 games going at once. Anything more than that, I understand I could set it up, but just becomes a struggle to follow it. No, Panthers and Broncos did not make, the big 4 quad box with 5 late afternoon games. But, man, just judging on what we saw out there, man, there is a lot of meat left on the bone despite that gaudy performance. Little Jordan Humphrey dropped a potential 50-yard touchdown. Troy Franklin let another nicely thrown ball down the sideline go right through his hands. Humphrey even had a chance at another touchdown where he didn't get the call when he was clearly held. So Bo Nix, man, it was against the Panthers. I get it. But, we were talking a little bit offline this week, Dwayne, and when we have a guy like him willing to run as much as he does, it's an offense that, let's face it, we don't like any of these pass catchers, and they're at least still springing guys open. We saw that even in the Saints game. Nick seems to be making the right decisions. I think he's improved his, processing speed as the year's gone on, which you'd expect from a rookie quarterback, albeit an old rookie quarterback. I understand the hit rate isn't great on these guys, but I'm not giving up on the idea that Nick's could be a pretty damn good NFL quarterback, Dwayne, at least for 60 minutes and a good matchup, man. That was the case today.
Yeah, man. And hat tip to Mr. Matthew Friedman. This was his the Friedman. This might be the best Friedman favorite I can ever remember, Ian. Dude came out here and scored 29.8 fantasy points. So yeah, if you had Bo Nix in your fantasy lineup, you were feeling absolutely freaking fantastic. But here's the thing, Ian, the last 4 games, 23.1 fantasy points, 20.7, 14.1, and then today 29.8. This guy is just doing it week in and week out now. I mean, we've got passing touchdowns of 2, 2, 0, and 3. And then you talked about what he's been doing on the ground. He's adding in there as well. So, man, we got to give Bo Nix an upgrade. Is he a borderline quarterback 1 now? I mean, because he can do it both ways. I mean,
he probably is on the season.
He is on the season. Yeah, he is on the season for sure. So I'm thinking he's a guy that we've got to have as a high-end QB2, at a minimum. I know it will come down to matchups and things, but man, I mean, when you get the scramble yards like he does, and then you also get the design, he didn't do much on the ground today. He only had 6 total yards rushing, 3 scrambling, 3 design. But the week before, man, 33 yards on scrambles, 42 on designed attempts. The week before, 61 on scrambles. The week before, he had a mix. So it's I don't know, man. He continued. Now these have been, the last 2 games against the Saints, whenever they don't have a quarterback that helps them play with any kind of lead, right? Their defense is actually not bad, but just terrible game scripts for their defense. And then the Panthers. So yeah, I mean, two easy matchups over the last 2 games, but still, man, Bo Nix, I got to figure out how far I'm moving him up. Interested in your thoughts.
3 of the last 4 weeks has put forward top 10 finishes. So yeah, it's not like it's a completely isolated one game. And next week, man, in Baltimore. So
oh my God, he's going to be a top 12 quarterback next week. Like he has to be.
Probably. And I've been reluctant.
I mean, we have 2 teams. We got what, Pittsburgh and 49ers on bye next week. So not a lot, but I still think he might be top 12.
And I've been reluctant to call the Ravens like this bad defense because they were so good last year and some of the early season stuff. They were facing some good passing games and stuff.
They're bad.
They're bad, man, especially with the injuries they have going on right now. So maybe if those fix themselves, we'll see what happens. But Bo Nix, man, right now, you're looking like a QB1 in Fantasyland. What a time to be alive. So Cortland Sutton was a big beneficiary of that today. Caught 8 of 11 targets for 100 yards. Fumbled at the 1-yard line at the end. I don't know who pissed off Sean Payton on the Panthers, man, but he was going out there.
Dialing it up.
He was on his, going full Ben Johnson, calling a fake field goal, calling a throwback pass, up 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. He did not care and, went ahead and got the win. So your Denver Broncos, man, have won 5 of their last 6 games now. Hey, good for them. So over with the Panthers, we did see Bryce Young finally get relieved of being in timeout, starting for Andy Dalton with that right thumb injury. 224 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. A lot of that did come on the final drive of the game in garbage time. Had a good opening drive, found Xavier Legette for a touchdown, and then Jalen Coker there at the end. But didn't exactly inspire a ton of confidence, Dwayne. But that said, this performance would have felt like a pipe dream after the first 2 weeks. So even if it was garbage time aided, at least we should be feeling a little bit better about that, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look, at least maybe there's some hope for Bryce Young. We also got the comment from Dave Canales that, yes, there is potential that they just go ahead and make the switch now to Bryce Young. I think they probably will, man. I mean, what's the point of Andy Dalton? You need to know what you have in Bryce Young so you can figure out, do you have to draft another quarterback next year? So not necessarily ideal. We'll see if Deontay Johnson ends up getting traded. But in this game, it was David Moore leading the team in route participation at 85%. Yeah, 7.9 fantasy points from Mr. Moore. Jalen Coker, number 2 at 81% route participation with an 18% target share. He gave you 17.8 fantasy points on the day. So thanks to scoring a receiving touchdown, he had 78 yards through the air. And then he had Xavier Legette. That was a little disappointing, Ian. I don't know if he got banged up or something. Looked like he was really active early and kind of faded away as the game went on. Yeah. I know he had 1 drop, but only a 63% route participation. I would have expected that in a game without Deontay Johnson to be like 90%. So not sure what's going on with that. We'll have to keep an eye on it. But none of these guys you're going to be super excited about. Jalen Coker is a guy that I will say, comes from a really small school, but you can only, like you always say, Ian, you can only hold the guy, up to the competition he had to face. Like he can't help it. Like he lined up against who he lined up against, and he was a pretty good player in college. And he kind of showed up not last weekend, but the week before, and kind of showed a little bit in the box score. So again, would have to be a really gross, like sicko league for you to even think about Jalen Coker. But maybe there's a chance that like he's the guy that they like. Now, Adam Thielen's going to be coming back off IR soon. Again, Deontay Johnson didn't play this week, so he would have to be traded. A lot of things would have to happen for Jalen Coker to be someone you cared about in fantasy. And the main thing being you would need to be in a really deep league.
Yeah, I tend to think Deontay is going to get traded for someone who's really played through injuries almost every single week. Now he's constantly getting banged up. I get it. I'm not saying the dude's 100% healthy out there, but really does seem to be a lot of smoke to that idea. And just, I don't know, man, really weeks ago, Schefter was already saying he didn't think Deontay was going to be in Carolina long-term. So at this point, why would you not trade him away and try to get some extra assets? So mentioned Legette had the early touchdown. We got his ever awesome, horse dance. And then we were going to get the stable one, Dwayne, because he broke open deep for maybe a 70-yard touchdown. Unfortunately, that was one of Bryce's worst throws of the day, overthrew him long. So had a couple nice sideline shots to Jalen Coker. We did see, again, a few flashes from the 2023 #1 overall pick. But for right now, again, tough to really trust anyone's passing game. And Chuba Hubbard has also started to cool off as well, Dwayne. Still getting plenty of usage. Went out there, had, 17 total touches, found his way to 71 total yards, but certainly looking like more of a, borderline RB2 as opposed to that RB1 that he was for a few weeks. And that's if and when Jonathan Brooks, remains out of the lineup.
Yeah, sorry. I was just reading the news that came across.
Oh, I know, man.
On Christian Kirk, man. I was like, oh, ouch. Maybe good for Brian Thomas Jr., but man, rough season for Christian Kirk all the way around. Broken collarbone. Ian will miss the rest of the year.
Absolutely sucks. So yeah, just real quick, going back to the Panthers. I mean, Chuba he is what he is until Jonathan Brooks comes back. Because once Brooks
but now they're talking. Yeah, if they bring Jonathan Brooks back, like they asked Canales, and he said it's a possibility he doesn't come back. So it's like, I don't know. Like, well, I think all bets are off right now with the Panthers. I don't think we know for sure how they want to handle the rest of the season. What are their goals? What are their objectives? They're not winning games, like, so they just want to, rest Jonathan Brooks. If they feel really good about him, they think they know what they have. I mean, what if he doesn't play the rest of the year? But yes, Chuba Hubbard, until we get him back, it is what it is. It's a bad offense, but like all the underlying stuff is there. 75% of the team's carries today. It just didn't equal very much.
Clear by training camp, Dwayne. That was a real report from alleged insiders back in April. That's what we're dealing with. So only other note I had real quick is Adam Troutman a thing? Because he had 85 yards and a touchdown. Sick one-handed catch in the end zone, man.
Let me switch back over. I had switched to the Panthers. No, you're good.
And he is someone, because I remember when we were hyped for him going to the Saints, man, he had like 14 touchdowns in that 1 year for the Dayton Flyers. So I don't know. Yeah,
he came from a small school, but like we've pretty much seen him long enough now that I'm gonna say no. And 34% route participation today. Last note on the Broncos. We saw Troy Franklin trending up, like doing his thing. No, just kidding. 39% route participation today. So that really sucks.
Yeah, probably because he dropped another freaking well-thrown bomb. So catch the ball, Troy. That's all I'm saying. I'm just going to be hateful towards Oregon Ducks forever now. So don't mind me, everyone. All right, 2 more matchups to get through on this lovely Sunday evening. We had the Chiefs take down the Raiders 27-20, staying undefeated. The Raiders did cover as 8.5-point dogs, though. The over did cash here at 43. So Patrick Mahomes threw for 262 yards and also 2 touchdowns. I know, it's like 350 for him, One to Travis Kelce, his first of the season, and one to Xavier Worthy on a short little play around the goal line. So really it was consolidated around those two. Dwayne, 12 targets for Kelce and 8 for Worthy, even in a game with DeAndre Hopkins making his debut. So how involved was the former Tennessee Titan in a game where, again, Andy Reid was saying before, expecting to use him a lot?
Yeah, not that involved. I mean, he got out there, 34% route participation, 21% targets per route run, but that's only a 9% target share. So we talked about him as being a guy that you just really needed to be careful with, like coming in, doesn't know the offense, all that sort of stuff. It's going to take a little bit for Hopkins to get going. I will say on the plays that he was out there, the thing that we heard from Andy Reid was not necessarily true. Only 9% were from the slot. So it wasn't necessarily, the way we had heard it, but we'll see what happens. Cause I do think if Hopkins plays inside and he does take like Juju's role, like there's some upside there with him once he's integrated into the offense. And Xavier Worthy, just quick shout out. Cause last week we talked about it, was it going to be a Fugazi 32% target share? Today he has a 23% target share. So 13.7 fantasy points, still not booming in a big way, but that's 2 positive steps though, Ian, out of the bye week. 2 weeks in a row where we're 22% plus target share. I think we have to take it.
Now, it's tough to be too optimistic just because, again, we do expect Hopkins to be moving up the depth chart more here and getting more targets, similar to, Shakira and Keon doing good things. But we know Amari Cooper is a sleeping giant there in Buffalo. But, hey, still, good targets for Worthy.
But also like your tweet, hey, most washed veterans going to a team, like no one cares, you're SpongeBob. And then, but they're going to the Chiefs. All of a sudden, they could, they're like, they've got all the muscles and
Jack SpongeBob.
Exactly. Jack SpongeBob. Exactly. So we'll see. Like DeAndre Hopkins is an older dude. Like I don't think it's totally out of the range of outcomes that Worthy is still the wide receiver 2 on this team after 2 positive games. Not saying it's a lock, but like he's done his part for the last 2 weeks.
Kareem Hunt coming into this game was the only NFL running back averaging at least 20 carries per game, and that will not change after 21 more in this one. Wasn't all that efficient, though, just 59 yards, did score a touchdown, chipped in 1 4-yard catch. So, again, Dwayne, certainly someone who is going to be more in that Tank Bigsby sort of, way of thinking where we want positive game scripts. We're not going to get too much, in terms of the pass catching usage. But, hey, we also would expect a lot more positive game scripts out of the Chiefs than we would the Jaguars. So, looking ahead in Week 9, going to be Chiefs versus the Bucks in Arrowhead on Monday Night Football. Kareem Hunt, I know in this spot, Dwayne, was someone that I do believe actually did crack our top 12. Maybe going to be a little bit closer, maybe that like RB20 spot just for that matchup. But hey, still someone that should continue to be put in the lineups with a decent level of confidence.
Yeah, I mean, mid-range running back 2 to low-end running back 2, and occasionally you have the right matchups that work out. But to your point, like getting all the work, 81% of the carries today. Samaje Perine still getting some of that passing down work.
Did seem like he got a little bit banged up late. I wouldn't say it seemed too serious, but just something to keep an eye on as we get in throughout the week. Over on the other sideline, the Gardner Minshew experience. They kept it competitive into the fourth quarter before the Chiefs pulled away. But hey, man, at least he did throw for 209 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 each to Jacoby Myers and even DJ Turner. So the return of Jacoby was nice. I mean, just his releases off the line, man, really are something. He's also quite good, at the catch point as well. So, reigning, I think, wide receiver 24, putting up some numbers today that, again, are going to make him close to at least that kind of mid-tier wide receiver 3, I would say, in the right matchups, which, hey, next week at the Bengals, that could certainly qualify. I just wish, Dwayne, that in a game without Devontae Adams and you're trailing throughout most of it, can we get Brock Bowers more than 5 freaking targets? Like, they were feeding him early. You saw it. I think there was a play where Trent McDuffie, one of the best corners in the freaking league, is on Brock Bowers, and it just didn't matter because he's too big for these corners, made a sweet contested fade, and again, caught every target thrown his way, just sadly was only 5 out there. So feeling good about Brock Bowers, feeling good about Jacoby Myers. Unfortunately, Dwayne can't feel all that good about Alexander Mattison. Hilarious, 14 carries for 15 yards on the ground. God, this is so Alexander Mattison. Someone saved the day with 5 catches for 29 yards receiving, but yeah, I got stopped not once, but twice on the goal line. Eventually saw the Raiders, turn the ball over on downs despite reaching the doorstep of that KC end zone. So I know last week, Dwayne, we had the really good uses from Mattison and looked like it was there once again, but as we saw earlier this year with Zamir White, a pretty easy way to lose that really good utilization is to not make anything of it, just like Mattison did today.
Yeah, I'm not going to let you just make me talk about Alexander Mattison. This is so gross. He did have 70% of the rushing attempts, 64% snap share, clearly led the team, in all the categories. 41% route participation. Yes, Mir Abdullah did get out there a little bit on pass downs, but it's like, do we really care? 9.4 fantasy points. Now, having said that, the Chiefs are really good against the run. They had that one game against Baltimore that kind of made things look wonky early, but that was really all Lamar. Against running backs, they've been really sound. They've been able to pretty much shut down everyone. So we weren't that crazy about Mattison, even though he had the full-time role last week. We'll see if he keeps it, though, because you come out and you have a game like this, it opens the door back up for a guy like Zamir White, who also didn't do anything, Ian. He finished with minus 0.5 yards. So, yeah, pretty gross day on the ground. I want to hit the receivers just really quick again. You already talked about Bowers. No need to hit it. But I do want to highlight Jacoby Myers. 100% route participation, 26% target share today, accounted for 21% of the team's air yards, scored 17.2 fantasy points. So Jacoby Myers, I think that Gardner Minshew is good enough to be in that 225-yard range, so I think it's mostly going to be Myers and Bowers, unless we eventually get like Michael Mayer or something like that back here. So pretty consolidated offense, not one that we love, but we don't have 4 or 5 mouths that we're having to feed here. So, I think you can be okay in fantasy. Jacoby Myers definitely in that wide receiver 3 conversation.
Takes us to our last game. The Commanders took down the Bears 18-15 on a freaking Hail Mary at the end, covering as 1.5 point faves, the under cash here at 46.5. So pretty dreadful game, I would say, Dwayne, for the first, 50 or so minutes of it. We did not have a touchdown until late in the third, but hey, started to get some late game fireworks with the Commanders, though. Jaden Daniels didn't exactly look like a guy who was dealing with such a painful rib injury as he uncorked that thing 60 yards downfield. Dwayne got tipped up into the air and then into the waiting arms of Noah Brown. So 326 yards, obviously a lot of those contributed from that long Hail Mary, but even before then, man, had found a way to get Terry McLaurin 125 yards, got Zach Ertz 77 yards on 7 catches, and just continued, man, to look like a really freaking good quarterback in a tough matchup. This was against the Bears. Next week, they're going to need to go face the New York Football Giants. So yeah, loving what we're seeing out of the Commanders, man. 6-2 now. Shout out Matthew Berry. His squad's looking good.
Yeah, 22 fantasy points today from Jaden Daniels. Shout out, we got to give ourselves a bat pack, a bat pack.
It's an hour 40 in. These sort of things start happening at this point in the pod.
Yeah. Hey, look, we should, Jaden Daniels, man, has been a smash. We give people a lot of advice on hey, here's players we would be drafting. Here's who we'd be targeting. He is a guy that we went all in on. So, man, I'm happy to see him doing this good. And I appreciate all the people reaching out and telling us they're so thankful they drafted him. I know last week he got hurt and it didn't work out, but yeah, man, is there a QB2 other than Jaden Daniels? It's QB1, Lamar Jackson. I think it's clearly QB2, Jaden Daniels the rest of the way. So you got to be feeling really good about that. And then, yeah, just looking over at the rest of the Commanders offense.
Big 4, but if you want us to call him QB2, I'm not going to disagree. Josh and Hurts have kind of earned that conversation, but that's it.
Yeah, I just feel like this year though, it's like Jaden Daniels, we've got a big enough sample now. It's like, okay. Like, I mean, just how much he does on the ground and through the air. It's just hard to think that he's anything, but QB2. But I'm with you. Like, he's in that top tier, right? Lamar's by himself right now. And then you got a tier of guys just below him. And I'm good with, hey, anytime you get to say you get to be with Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen for the guy that you took how many rounds later than them, you're getting him in round 9 or round 10. Yeah.
And of course, Baker Mayfield too. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, and that's what a bat pack means. That's what a bat pack is. Whenever you take Jaden Daniels in round 9 of your fantasy draft and they perform as well as Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, you'll take it. Looking at the rest of the offense, Brian Robinson Jr. was finally off the injury report this weekend. Ian, we saw him get back more to that role that we had seen before the last 2 games. He even missed a game in between. Like, he played an injured game, he missed a game, and then kind of played injured again. So he had 50% of the rushing attempts, not quite where he was to start the season, but getting close back to that. So I think we'll be able to look at Brian Robinson as being a guy that we'll want in our fantasy lineups more often than not. Didn't have a huge day today, only 9 fantasy points, but only 8 points for Austin Eckler, who took the passing down work. So early downs, Brian Robinson Jr., passing downs, Austin Eckler. Nothing really big in the passing game, and unless there was something like that you were wanting me to look at. Still pretty, Terry McLaurin doing Terry McLaurin things. Yeah. Zach Ertz still, being Zach Ertz. Like, it's not winning you fantasy matchups, but you get 14.7 fantasy points out of Zach Ertz. That's really good this year at tight end. Like, he led the team today with a 32% target share.
I mean, and honestly, it was surprising to see the Bears hanging around this game as long as they did. Washington had tons of chances to find the end zone. Luke McCaffrey initially seemed to have a short touchdown catch in the back of the end zone. Couldn't quite get the feet in, though. Zach Ertz had one that, honestly, I still kind of think could have been ruled a touchdown, had it 9 yards, and then kind of as he was going to the ground, defender ended up ripping it out. I think he could argue he had already established possession, though. And then Olamide Zaccheaus, Dwain, for anyone out there, and again, the true skank leagues. I mean, I don't even think he's rostered in my 32-team league. Maybe we'll see, but 30-yard touchdown on a bubble screen got nullified on illegal man downfield penalties. So, hey, Terry McLaurin, Brian Robinson, and obviously Jaden Daniels loving life there. And
it was your guy, Noah Brown, though. Ian had a 79% route participation today, so we probably should call that out. You were just a little early on him. I can't remember if it was last week or the week before.
I think it was last week. Never wrong this early. He continues to lead in DPS.
Yeah. I mean, he was right there with McLaurin and Ertz as far as the guys running the most routes. And to your point, like, his big play today came through on the Hail Mary. He was the guy behind the tip that kind of goes past everybody, and he's just standing there all alone.
I will say, Ertz, man, like, he just put up his 3rd straight top 12.
I'm telling you, man. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I know people aren't crazy about it, but like, he's a tight end 1.
Yeah. He really is at this point. So I thought for a second that Ben Sinnott made a sweet play, like trucking a dude on the sideline, but no, that was actually John Bates.
That was Bates.
There, so, oh man, that was still a wild storyline this summer. But over on the Bears side of things, really, really disappointing game from Caleb.
Williams, man. So bad.
Like, he had a couple nice throws late. The honey hole shot to DJ Moore that got him hurt, ended up getting them down there. And hey, they were in position to win the game without the Hail Mary. So, okay, whatever. But man, coming off the bye, a matchup that we've given Washington credit. They're not this pushover on defense. We understand that, but not a team that you still want to be going 10 of 24 for 131 yards against, man. So I'm happy to blame Shane Waldron for all my troubles in life. Don't get me wrong, but you got DJ Moore, you got Roma Dunze, you got Keenan Allen, you got DeAndre Swift, man, even giving you 129 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Electric 56-yard touchdown run. Can we get more out of Caleb Williams, man? What was that?
Man, it was terrible. 42% completion rate today. It really looked like week 1 Caleb, where we had 48%. 131 yards passing. That's after coming off of 304 and 226-yard performances. And I remember at the time, you're like, yep, it's the Panthers, it's the Jaguars. So maybe that's what it was. It was the Panthers and the Jaguars. Right now, it's tough to feel good about Caleb Williams. Like, I felt like he was finally getting that momentum, but now we have to look at him as a pure boom bust player. And that makes it hard, Ian, to get him inside your top 12, which is the way we were that's the way we were trending. And in this matchup, to your point, a big takeaway on Washington the last 2 weeks, man, is like, this defense has turned around. Dan Quinn has done a great job. It's no longer a smash matchup for wide receiver 1s that used to be a walk in the park. It's no longer that, but still, to your point, it's not like a defense that we're like, this is impenetrable. It's just a better defense than what it used to be. So yeah, to see Caleb come out here and struggle like this, and it hurts everything. It really downgrades everything. We were back to the spot where like, okay, we could trust DJ Moore as a wide receiver too. No, you can't. Like he's a boom bust wide receiver 3. That's what he is. Keenan Allen, oh, maybe he's a wide receiver 3 again. No, he's not. He's a wide receiver 4 because this kind of crap can happen. And then Rome Odunze, it's a complete killer for him. We'll see what happens with DJ Moore. I know he got banged up at the end of the game. Yeah. So Rome Odunze did get a little bit more work late in the game, picked up a few fantasy points for you if you happen to be having to start him. Talented guys. We have no doubt about and Caleb too. They're all talented, but it's just a young team and it's not meshing really well right now.
Did see DJ return after that injury. How could you not see him when Caleb threw a 1-yard fade like 50 feet into the air? Well, what was that, man? Like, again, just
I don't know. I must have missed that one.
Just again holding on to the ball. You should have seen my freaking group chat with all my Chicago buddies just going in on the dude all freaking day. So had plenty of good vibes in before then. Again, just one data point, as you like to say, but certainly not a good one. So Cole Kmet, 1 catch for only 14 yards. Thought we might have had something there. He's not helping out our respective dynasty squads this week. But yeah, man. Otherwise, anyone that had Bears backup center Doug Kramer. Sorry you guys missed out on that 1-yard touchdown. If that's not enough to get you fired as an OC, man, I don't know what is. What the hell? Are you trying to call back like to Refrigerator Perry? Don't do it when you're literally losing in the 4th quarter of a game, man. Come on.
Yeah, I don't know. Does he think he's Ben Johnson, for the Lions? Just out here, pulling all the strings? No, Shane Waldron. Come on, let's get the basics down. Now, I have nothing else to add here. Everybody's in the same role. It was just a really bad game for everyone.
Other than DeAndre Swift, who continues to
other than DeAndre Swift, who saved you with the huge run.
Dude,
but nice to see him rip off the explosive play. Yes.
That's now, let's see, first 3 games of the year, he had 30, 42, and 42 scoreless yards. Since then, 165 and a touchdown, 120 and a touchdown, 119 and a touchdown. And today, again, went out there and got 129 and a score all on the ground. So didn't think we'd be sitting here.
We need this offense. We need this offense to be halfway decent for us to feel real good about DeAndre Swift moving forward.
It was a cool 56-yard touchdown run, but not exactly the most, repeatable event in the world. Yeah, stable. So Bears at Cardinals next week should be an easy enough matchup, and they're going to need to improve in a hurry before we get to some of these tougher end-of-season spots. So
Odunze versus Marv. All right.
Well, I'm sure, the world treat that one, with a good rational mindset. So I'm losing track of my words too, Dwayne, which means it is time for us to get out of here. Appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, we'll be back on Monday morning, aka like 12 hours from now. Myself, Paul Charging, and Chris Allen overreacting and underreacting to the day's biggest events. Dwayne's going to be ground utilization. I will be right behind him with the sheesh goodness before too long. So hitting that halfway point of the season, keep that energy up, people. We still got some work to do to capture those fantasy football championships. So for Dwayne, I'm in. Thanks again.